We have one public comment person signed up, Mr. Richard Perboziak. Is person who wants to make a public comment available in the room? Okay, moving right along. Any select board members have announcements, or?
I do.
Here? Okay.
On Saturday, I've discussed this before, but I wanted to remind everyone that Saturday is the annual Brookline Porch Fest, which is a really fun event of people of various bands playing on various people's porches. And one of those porches will be mine at 1 o'clock on Saturday. Two Clays for Comfort is playing. They're fantastic. Last year, lots of people came to watch, and people were dancing, and the kids were also dancing. It was a lot of fun. So I urge you to look around town. There are 81 porches being used, and 120 bands. Some bands are playing twice between 1 o'clock, 12 noon is the kickoff, and 1 o'clock to 7 o'clock there'll be the performances. There's a map and a schedule on the website, brooklineporchfest.org, and you can check it out, or you can pick up a map here at Town Hall, at the libraries, the kiosks, the Coolidge Corner Theater, banks, and other businesses have them. So this year, we're having this kickoff, as I mentioned, from 12 to 1 on the front lawn of the Brookline Village Public Library, right out here, with music and food. And the addition this year is that the Blue Bike single fare trip is only to Porch Fest is for Saturday, June 8th, is only $1. So you can check the BrooklinePorchFest.org website for details, but it should be a very fun event. And it looks like it won't rain till nighttime, which is fantastic.
Great, thank you. Any other announcements?
I wanted to plug two upcoming events. It's going to be a busy weekend here in Brookline. On Sunday, June 9th, from noon to 4, there's a festival, the 4th annual Village Fair in Brookline Village. It's been going on since 2015. It's sure to have a whole bunch of fun and exciting stalls, not only from local businesses, but also town departments and local organizations. So for information, check out thevillagefair.org. And then a little bit further into the future, on Friday, June 21st, from 4 to 7:30 p.m., the Commission on Diversity, Inclusion, and Community Relations is going to be holding a Food Truck Friday event, at which there'll be some food trucks, as well as music and kids' games and Touch a Truck tours of fire and DPW trucks. So the Driscoll School Field and Playground on Friday, June 21st, from 4 to 7:30 p.m.
Thank you. Any others?
Mr. Chair, I have an announcement. A few weeks, the board had authorized me to open the bids and contract for the town's Community Choice Electricity Aggregation Program. Now, even though our current program doesn't expire until December 31st, we were advised to test the market and go out to bid in the marketplace, and we did so last Wednesday? Thursday? Wednesday. And I'm pleased to report that we had some very favorable bids. So this is the renewal of the town's Community Choice Electricity Aggregation Program. We selected a firm called Direct Energy, and we decided to expand our offerings a little bit. We still have the Brookline Basic, which is the 0% additional renewable, which happens always, at least to this point, be lower than the similar Eversource rate. We have Brookline Green, which is our default rate, and in this case, we've moved from 25% additional renewable energy to 30%. A Brookline Green Plus, which is the new option, and that's 65% additional renewable energy, and then the Brookline All Green, which is the 100% additional renewable energy. This would be a 35-month contract that will commence in January 1st of 2020. I'm advised from our consultants, and also I had some local experts, Nancy Heller being one, and Werner Lowy helped, as well as Tommy Vitolo, our state representative and an expert in the energy field, and also our staff person Zoe Lynn, who was preceded by Maria Morelli, really helped to bring this program together. So overall, we're really pleased with the bids and the fact that we can improve our default rate a bit and add this new Green Plus proposal.
Great, thank you.
Oh, I have one. We're having a feedback forum on the shared electric scooter pilot program next Wednesday in this room at 6:30. So anyone who wants to give their opinion, I will be listening.
Thank you, I'm sure you'll get a lot of opinions. Okay, is Mr. Per Broshasik in the room yet? No. Okay, let's move right along to the miscellaneous calendar. Question of approving and executing the home subrecipient agreements with West Metro Home Consortium. Mr. Viola.
Good evening. Joe Viola, Assistant Director for Community Planning. As the board is aware, the town receives a yearly allocation of home funding. That funding is administered through the West Metro Home Consortium. Recently, the West Metro Home Consortium had a HUD audit, and HUD had required that the West Metro Home Consortium actually execute subrecipient agreements with all of the member communities. There are 13 member communities as part of the West Metro Home Consortium. What this agreement does is, what we're being asked to sign, it sets forth the terms and conditions under which each community becomes a subrecipient of home funds. And as well, it outlines the general provisions and processes by which Brookline may in turn fund our own local projects that receive home funding. It's a long agreement. Schedules A and B are specific to Brookline, but the West Metro Home Consortium is looking for the town to execute Schedule G, which is to be executed by the town's chief elected official. They're requesting every community to execute to Schedule G and to return them to the West Metro Home Consortium in order to be in compliance with HUD's audit, requesting that each community, in order to update their files and be in compliance with HUD regulations. That's why Newton has asked us to sign this document.
Hey, any questions? Anything else to add?
Nothing else to add. I mean, I will say we do have a mutual cooperation agreement. This agreement that we're asking the board to execute, it basically, it's a more formalized version of what we've had in the past. So I think HUD is looking for a more formal way to acknowledge the responsibilities of the town as a subrecipient and also the people we give the funding to.
Great, thank you. Move approval of the subrecipient agreement. Sir?
Brown is looking to.
Is there a time for public comments on this or no?
Would you like to? Okay.
Deborah Brown, Brookline resident. I've just got, most of it's probably a point of, just information. But as we're taking money in from HUD, one of my concerns is that we make sure that the funds are equitably distributed so that a fair or representative sum actually ends up in the hands of low-income people. I am also interested in making sure that the subrecipients, that there are minority and women-owned business provisions in there that are being attended to. And lastly, to the extent that it involves actual housing, that the housing actually begins to focus on families with children.
Mr. Viola, do you have any assurances on those points?
Quickly, any federal funding that's administered through HUD by definition, needs to be targeted to low mod income folks. As far as WBE, MBE provisions, women and minority-owned business enterprises, as part of a administration of a construction contract, certain projects of a large size, a contractor is obligated to be sure that women and minority-owned businesses receive get a share of the construction contracts that are being executed in order to bring a housing development online. That's two of the three.
Yeah.
But
Is there monitoring of that requirement?
there is.
And have reports been generated that show compliance or not?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. Every project, I can assure you that there's a lot of oversight when federal money is going into a housing project, or even with home funds, or even into our own CDBG projects. There are layers of oversight, and monitoring does happen. But I will just say, by definition, home funds and block grant funds are meant to be targeted primarily to individuals of low mod income.
Could you share those reports with the board?
For a specific housing project, we could show you what kind of monitoring occurs.
I thought you said that the use of the funds are monitored with respect to minority and women businesses, and that reports are written. So just so the board has a sense of...
So you have an idea of
Yeah.
when those provisions apply to
Right.
Sure, I could do that.
Okay. It's an issue that comes up, and we need to be in a position to answer people's questions on that particular point.
I'd be happy to do that.
Okay, great.
My issue is principally that a disproportionate amount of the money is actually going toward moderate and not low. And so I guess if the chair is asking for minority business information, perhaps the chair would be willing to also get general funding information and the income breakdowns for those projects as well.
So I'm looking at Schedule B, which has some pretty strict stipulations about how the dollars are going to be used. Not only is there an obligation of the member community, again, according to Schedule B, to comply with home program regulations, but also stipulation that for tenant-based rental assistance, 90% of the households receiving the assistance will be at or below 60% of the AMI. And for home ownership projects, 100% of the funds will be used to invest in dwelling units that are occupied by households with an income of at or below 80% of AMI. So I think there's some information in this packet already which stipulates how these dollars are going to be used. And
I read that.
Yep.
I read that.
Okay.
My concern is that what I think ends up happening is those funds, how much of those funds are used to help with elderly housing versus housing with families, young children? That's the kind of piece I'm getting at.
Yeah, okay, so there's a CDBG advisory committee that I think Ben is the liaison for, that I think discusses and monitors these questions. The question of low-income versus moderate-income housing is a separate question from the minority and women business question. But, you know, the CDBG advisory committee is probably where you ought to direct some of those questions. So, okay, I don't want to get into a back and forth,
I just don't want to
but...
get to a place where I actually send the request to HUD to actually do a more thorough. Because I think that there are opportunities here that we should be more on the affirmative and less just sort of waiting for things to happen.
Okay. Thank you. Anything else, Mr. Viola? Yeah. Okay. So move the question of approving and executing the home subrecipient agreements with Metro West or West Metro Home Consortium Mr. Franco?
Aye.
Ms. Heller?
Aye.
Ms. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Fernandez?
Aye.
Chair votes aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Question of approving and executing a disclosure by non-elected municipal employee of financial interest and determination by appointing authority as required by Chapter 268A, Section 19, for Park and Recreation Commissioner Wendy Sheridan.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Ms. Sheridan called me earlier today. She did not realize that this item was going to be on our agenda, and her husband is away this evening, and she has 3 children. So she was not able to attend, and she asked me to talk about the situation on her behalf. So she is a director of the Brookline Girls Youth Lacrosse program. And last year she was a coach, and this year she does some coaching. This is a complete volunteer position. She has no financial assistance. In fact, she says it costs her money because she produces stuff on her computer and she does work, etc. So like all volunteers, right? So she was directed to call. She understood that there was an athletic field consultant, an assessment done by a consultant, and the Park and Rec Commission is going to be discussing it, and she wants to participate in those discussions. When she called the State Ethics Commission, they advised her that just as the better part of valor, she should submit the form, even though she has no financial interest, and she doesn't really view it as any kind of conflict. So I would think that we would, do whatever we need to do is approving it and executing it. And, she's one of 7 members of the Park and Rec Commission, and she is going to be asked to review and vote on policy programs and athletic field design development that impacts youth and adult sports. And I know for a fact that she's interested in lacrosse, but she's also interested in many of the other programs that come before Park and Rec. So she wants to participate in those discussions. She says that she may review policy regarding the field use and allocation, permitting, et cetera. That's in this section of her application. But she has no financial interest. She's a volunteer.
Thank you. Any questions? So we're going to be asked to make the following determination, and I'll read it, and then we can vote on it. As appointing officials, as required by Chapter 268A, Section 19, we have reviewed the particular matter and the financial interests identified above by a municipal employee. Period. We have determined that the financial interest is not so substantial as to be deemed likely to affect the integrity of the services which the municipality may expect from the employee. So, based on what Ms. Heller discussed and the materials in our packet, it seems like something that we should vote yes on. And there's no serious conflict there. And I understand the importance of even eliminating any appearance of possible conflicts. So unless anyone has objection, I'll call the roll. Mr. Franco?
Aye.
Ms. Heller?
Aye.
Ms. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Fernandez?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. So, our next item, 8C, the question of approving and authorizing 3 contracts for construction phase services in connection with the Gateway East project. Let's see, we have 3 projects, or 3 contracts. One with VHB, a engineering firm, as I understand, in the amount of $277,600. Contract with Stantec in the amount of $37,200, and a contract with KZLA in the amount of $9,310. Mr. Viola again.
Joe Viola, Assistant Director for Community Planning. As the board will recall, the town and the Mass Department of Transportation executed a municipal project agreement on April 5th, and part of that agreement required the town to fund construction phase services for this project. To that end, the planning department retained VHB. VHB was the town's overall project designer. We worked with the Department of Public Works, Engineering, and Transportation Division to retain Stantec and KZLA. All three of these consultant teams were part of the design process for this project. We're looking to bring them back on board to be part of the construction phase services team for this 2+ year construction project. The town's project representatives will provide construction administration, inspectional, and other design services specifically to address unexpected conditions in the field or potential design conflicts that could occur. It's a very complicated roadway. There are a number of projects happening in the area, a hotel, the 2 to 4 Brookline Place, and a housing development. There's a lot of field coordination that will need to occur. And as well, we're asking our design team to provide as-built survey plans. And what this will do is to give the town an accurate record of all the infrastructure and utility work that's completed under MassDOT's Gateway East contract. So the deliverable from our contractors will be, an accurate record of everything that's been built out there. Given the project's pending construction start date, which is imminent, it's an opportune time. It's needed to have our construction phase services teams ramp up and to be available to start dealing with some of our construction management issues.
Great. Any questions? Steve? Could you come up to the microphone?
So I was just curious. in
Announce
knowing-
your name for the
Steve
public.
Vogel, Precinct 5, and part of the GARE Community Group. I was interested in knowing whether in these projects, which seem to me to be a sum total of about $310,000, judging A through C, whether any of the businesses that are contracted with are minority and women-owned businesses. And if not, what we could do to make sure that in the future that those are considerations that we take into significant account before contracts are offered.
I would just offer, to my knowledge, none of these consulting firms are minority or women-owned business enterprises. I will say the reason why they've been retained is because they've basically been the same firms on board for going on 5 to 7 years. They've actually taken us through initial design to final design. It makes all the sense in the world to have these three firms on board to be the folks answering questions when construction issues arise, and if there are requests for clarifications that are coming from roadway contractors. So usually in a competitive bidding process, if you were starting from a new procurement, there would be an opportunity to look to engage minority and women business enterprises. In this case, the answer is we're using the design team is now our construction management team, and that's the reason why we brought them on board, or we're looking to bring them on board.
Any other questions? Bro?
Just a comment, just that I think you can anticipate that these questions will come up every time we see you here before us. So
Sure.
If you can continue to anticipate those questions and maybe even provide that information as you deliver the reports, that would be really helpful.
Sure.
If I
Thanks.
could just add, I mean, obviously, Mr. Viola doesn't set policy. So to be clear, this town does not have a requirement to do so. So I think this is this is a discussion this board should have. And so I'll work with Select Board Chair Green to tee it up. Clearly, we've been talking about this as part of the new consulting process that we're going to go through, setting goals about racial equity. And so I'm quite sure, and I already know the procurement director is prepared to evaluate that and set a goal around that. But it really ought to really be at this table, or maybe even at town meeting where we set the bylaws of the town. We do participate in a lot of federally and state-funded projects that do have these requirements. So, for example, if we're participating in the MSBA, but we don't have such a requirement, and staff would need to be directed if it was the policy of the town to pursue that.
Yeah, I'd also add that it's not just ensuring that minority or women in business firms are employed, but also to look into the employment practices of the firms that are not minority or women businesses, make sure that, they do comply with our equal opportunity employment policies, which are also national policies. I think we've raised this in one committee of 7 that I participated in, and we found some interesting information as a result of asking those questions. And by asking the question, you're sort of putting people on notice that this is an important issue, and they ought to address it in their firm's operations. So. Any other questions?
Well, I'll just echo in response to Mr. Kleckner's identification of the current situation that I would be interested in the town developing such a policy. It sounds like we're moving in that direction, and I would encourage Mr. Kleckner or Mr. Giannakakis to let me and I think my colleagues know what needs to be done in order to advance that.
I think also there's consideration when we're hiring a firm to do a very large job, we also need to be aware of the fact that that firm is going to have subcontractors, and I know that at the high school we've made sure that those have requirements for trying to recruit and using minority and women-owned businesses. I don't know that we've been always successful in that, but we do want to know about it and ask the questions and encourage it. So it's not just a matter of hiring the actual firm; it's also the subs under the main firm.
Any other questions, comments? Okay, I move approval and authorizing of 3 contracts for construction phase services in connection with the Gateway East project with VHB, Stantec, and KZLA. All in favor, Mr. Franco?
Aye.
Ms. Heller?
Aye.
Ms. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Fernandez?
Aye.
And chair votes aye.
Thank you.
Next, question of approving and executing the following contract amendments with William Ron Associates in connection with the Brookline High School expansion projects, vibration mitigation design and engineering services, MBTA Cypress Building Entry Plaza expansion redesign. Mr. Masek.
Ray Masek here, Building Department. Amendment 8 is for vibration isolation services. We went over to Kent Street and the co-chairs to observe what the MBTA vibration and noise would be like, because the Kent Street Apartments is built over the MBTA tracks, and this is a amendment to minimize the vibration and structural-borne sound into this Cypress building. We have a theater right below the MBTA tracks.
Right above it.
You mean above?
I'm sorry. Yes.
Okay. Any questions? Hearing none, I move approval and authorization for the execution of the contract with William Ron Associates in connection with the Brookline High School expansion projects for vibration mitigation design and MBTA Cypress Building Entry Plaza Expansion redesign. All in favor, Mr. Franco?
Aye.
Ms. Heller?
Aye.
Ms. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Fernandez?
Aye.
And chair votes aye. Thank you. Are you up next, too?
Of course.
Okay. Question of approving a change order, number 3, in the amount of $3,099,881 with Skanska USA Building, Inc., in connection with the pre-GMP 3 Brookline Hills OCS and Site Enabling MBTA. Explain all those abbreviations, too.
I can't.
Well,
This is a-
GMP, you know, right?
Yes.
Pretty.
Pre-GMP means the guaranteed maximum price.
Okay.
As part of bringing a construction manager at risk, CM at R, we had the opportunity to do early bid packages and get the project moving ahead, so we can meet our schedule of getting the building done within 2 years. So GMP3 deals with the enabling services regarding the MBTA, or the overhead catenary system. The lines that the green line runs on, they need to be lowered, and then there's some site electrical work that we need to do with the MBTA station.
Okay, any questions? No? Did you have a question, Ms. Brown? And it's not a hearing, but I'll accommodate that.
Thank you. Deborah Brown, Brookline resident. A quick comment, I actually have a draft minority and women-owned business bylaw that I was going to submit this year, but I decided maybe we don't need to actually submit one through the warrant article process, that we should be able to just do it administratively. So Mel, I'll get it to you by the end of the week. I see here that this is a $3 million project, which is a little bit different than $200,000. I am going to renew that question about women and minority-owned businesses, and to the extent that this is a prime contractor, that doesn't preclude the prime from going out and identifying women and minority-owned subcontractors. And as Chairperson Green pointed out, there are also employment conditions that we should be asking the contractors to meet. So I just want to renew that, because $3 million, if you take 10%, then, you know, if we're talking about somebody potentially being able to support their family for a year. So I think we need to take, we've got to take these questions to heart. And I don't think we should kick it down the road another year. I don't think we should pilot it. I think we should make it a serious priority, because this town is talking about serious dollars. And I understand this is, you know, I don't know whether it's federal or not, but as a town that's committed to diversity and inclusion, our diversity and inclusion should extend to following the money. So, thank you.
I'd like to reply to that. We understand women business enterprise and minority business is an important issue, and that was included as part of our contract. And they're going to do best effort.
Are there any minority contractors on this?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Women-owned.
We've just got it started. It's a much larger project, and we are monitoring that. It is part of their contract to look into minority business enterprises.
And agree.
We'll talk later.
I know what minority business enterprise is.
Do you know there's a difference?
Wait, can we not have a back and forth like this? I mean, other than for me to say that, you know, this is a issue that's a lot more complex than I think people sometimes gives it credit for. The issue involves certification of minority and women businesses, which is a huge complex problem. It's a process that discourages many minority and women businesses from actually participating, and it's something that you know, for us to actually go forward with a more aggressive program would require a lot more thought than just, what we can do at this meeting, so. That's it. So, okay, question of approving change order number 3 in the amount of $3,099,881 with Skanska USA Building. Mr. Franco.
Aye.
Mrs. Heller.
Aye.
Ms. Hamilton.
Aye.
Mr. Fernandez.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Are you still up here? Okay. Oh, wine and malt beverages.
Temporary licenses.
Right, okay, it's not Mr. Masak. Question of granting a temporary wine and malt beverages sales license to Coolidge Corner School, PTO, in connection with a community building event and wine tasting being held June 10 to 13 from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. at 345 Harvard Street. Who is going to be presenting on this one?
So this is a one-day license. I don't think we generally have
Okay.
presentations on
Yeah,
one-day
yeah,
Okay,
licenses.
good.
In fact, you can take them as an omnibus vote if you want.
Okay, let's do an omnibus vote, including that.
Go through H.
Temporary all kinds beverages, non-sales license to Lars Anderson Auto Museum in connection with the wedding. One-day entertainment license to the Arts Brookline Music School in connection with Brookline Porch Fest on June 8, and that's it. All in favor?
Well, so
Or any questions?
let me just note that the police department has reviewed all these temporary applications and sees no reason to deny them.
Great. Okay. Any questions, comments? All in favor? Mr. Franco?
Aye.
Ms. Heller?
Aye.
Ms. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Fernandez?
Aye.
And Chair votes aye. Question of approving the application of,
Yes, let me ask you, this is 8I. Is either of these applicants for the Alden Castle here? If that's not the case, then I'm going to ask that the board defer it. I know I've asked that before. We've been trying to work through some issues in the application that I need to speak with some folks at that corporation. Haven't had a chance to do that, so I will ask you, unfortunately, again, to defer 8I. 8J is ready for approval.
okay, great. So, question of renewing a mobile food vendor license for Super Stand Ice Cream Truck, Hanny Hindi, operator. Is Mr. Hindi in?
No, we don't ask.
Okay.
We don't.
Any questions? Okay. All in favor, Mr. Franco?
Aye.
Ms. Heller?
Aye.
Ms. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Fernandez?
Aye.
And chair votes aye. Okay, moving on to our calendar. Human Resources Director. Question of appointing Ann Hess Braga, Esquire, MPA, as Director of Human Resources, as recommended by the Town Administrator, Melvin A. Kleckner. Mr. Kleckner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening. So it's my pleasure this evening to recommend for your approval the appointment of Ann Hess Braga as Human Resources Director. I know you're aware of Ms. Braga, and you've had a chance to say hello to her. Ms. Hess Braga is a career human resources professional. Up to just recently, she was employed in the city of Boston. Most recently, she was the Director of Talent Acquisition Management and Employment. And then prior to that, she was the Compliance Officer of the Human Resources Department. So clearly has a lot of experience in the municipal employment arena, civil service, employment law, and all those things that are required by a Human Resources Department. Ms. Braga also, served as a staff liaison or staff director of the Boston City Council, which you can imagine she got quite a baptism and in politics and in government, and so really has a good understanding of the context and the issues that the town of Brookline is involved in. So let me talk a little bit about the process. So this is actually the second time that we went through a recruitment process. The first did not result in what we consider to be a robust enough applicant pool. So we hired a consultant by the name of the NPAG. Let me get the name of that Nonprofit Professionals Advisory Group. We've actually used them before and found them to be really useful. And we hired them again, and they did a real active, proactive search for candidates and talked to a lot of people, got the word out, and we then went forward with candidates from that process. I also, as is my practice, appointed a panel to assist me in the evaluation of candidates, and I always include a board member. As it turns out, that was Select Board Member Wyszynski, who's since moved off the board, but nonetheless, we had a very good committee. Names are listed in my memo, very helpful to me to not only in the beginning to scope out the position and make sure we're moving forward with our job advertisement, job description, but also they actually interviewed candidates and it was extremely helpful for me. They identified three candidates in particular that then I sat down with through an extended process, identified Ann as the candidate that I thought would bring the town forward in the area of human resources. We certainly have a lot to work on in that area, and I'm very pleased to submit her candidacy for your recommendation at this time. I did include her resume, but if you have any questions whatsoever, happy to answer them as well as Ann.
Any questions? Comments? Observations?
How did you hear about the opening?
Well,
Hi, Ann Braga. I heard about the opening through the firm that was used by the town to go out and do proactive recruiting. And they called me and contacted me like the 2nd of January. And I'm like, who calls on the 2nd of January? But so.
Excellent, thank you.
well, I'll make a comment. You heard Mr. Vogel and Ms. Brown talk about diversity and inclusion issues, and that extends to our hiring practices as well. And I think I had a conversation with you in the past couple of days, and I'm sure that other board members have articulated this point to you as well, that it's something that I take very seriously, and I hope that you and I and the board and the town administration can work together to recruit a diverse applicant pool and promote a culture of inclusion amongst town employees. So thank you for your partnership in advance. I know that you're committed to it, and I look forward to working with you.
Yeah, I would just add to Mr. Franco's comment that it's very important, and we talked about this when we met, that you also keep the board apprised of the successes that we're having in that area or the problems we're having, just so we're on top of the implementation of our desire to increase the diversity of our applicant pool and employee base. So.
Similarly, we also had some of these same conversations. We agreed around the importance of the recruitment and retention of a diverse workforce and how representation matters in our policy-making, decision-making, especially at the managerial level. We talked about policies many of our policies are by nature restrictive. They tell us where the boundaries are and where we should not go beyond those boundaries, but also there are policies that can be liberating, policies that allow women to better fully participate in working in the town, people of various gender identities, parents, elders or people who are taking care of elders. So thinking about policies that also remove barriers to participation, remove barriers to working here being also very important. We also talked about having clear expectations and that people across town, in whatever department they're in, whatever sort of workspace they're in, whether it be an office, a firehouse, a police department, a DPW facility, they are very clear on what our expectations are in terms of behavior in the workplace. And then just to echo the chair, that certainly that we want to know when people are not living up to the expectations, and there's been times when maybe things haven't been brought to the attention of the board. Certainly, I want to say publicly that I want to know when people aren't living up to the expectations who are employed by the town. And I know we talked about all those things, and I feel very confident that that'll be the case going forward.
Any other comments?
No, I would echo what my fellow board members have said. We had a very good conversation, understand the depth of your knowledge about HR, and I'm looking forward to working with you.
I enjoyed our conversation regarding training. I think that that is going to be a huge factor going forward, especially as we complete our equity audits to make sure that everybody is aware of what the expectations and rules of engagement and our policies that are created as a result. So,
Any other comments, questions? So I move approval of the recommendation of the town administrator to appoint Ann Hess-Braga as Director of Human Resources. All in favor, Mr. Franco?
Aye.
Ms. Heller?
Aye.
Ms. Hamilton?
aye.
Mr. Fernandez?
Aye.
And chair votes aye. Congratulations and welcome aboard. Okay, next, we're going to hear a presentation from the MBTA on their Green Line street crossing project. And I see that we have a presentation on there.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak today in front of the board. My name is Katya Rizhova. I'm a project manager for MBTA Capital Delivery Department. Today also with me is Lisa Lepore. She's a senior director of transit infrastructure. So today I would like to give you a brief overview of a new project that is about to start. It's called Green Line Intersections Upgrade, and it will have an impact on town of Brookline this summer. So I'll talk a little bit about the project, about the scope, impacts on the neighbors and Green Line riders. I'll tell you about public outreach efforts and our communications plan, and then if you have any questions at the end, I'll be happy to answer those. So as I said, the name of the project is Green Line Intersection Upgrades, and the purpose is to create a smoother, faster, and safer experience for T-riders and pedestrians and bicyclists and drivers over track intersections with streets. The contract was awarded to Barletta Heavy Division, and the scope of the project involves the replacement of track and road surface at approximately 30 locations where the railroad crosses the streets. It's also called grade crossings. We are planning to rebuild 16 crossings on Commonwealth Avenue on B line, 12 along Beacon Street on C line, 1 on Huntington Avenue on Green Line E, and 1 on Central Avenue on the Mattapan high-speed line. So the project had multiple coordination meetings with town DPW to make sure all town requirements and recommendations are incorporated. So here's the map. It's a little bit small and hard to see, but it gives you an idea of yellow dots are the locations where we'll be working. And we have a project website on the bottom, www.mbta.com/GL-intersections. It has an interactive map. If you're interested to, you can go and see, zoom in on the locations. So here's a list of the locations on C line, which is within the Brookline, town of Brookline limits. From east to west, we'll be working at Carlton Street, Haas Street, Kean Street, St. Paul Street, Winchester Street. It has a vehicle and pedestrian crossing. Marion Street, Summit Avenue, Westbourne Terrace, Washington Street, Winthrop Road, Tappan Street, and Englewood Avenue. So just one of the examples of the existing condition. I apologize, it should say Beacon Street at Englewood Avenue intersection, not the Commonwealth. You can see that the surfaces, the asphalt is in a pretty poor condition. So we plan to reconstruct it, and the result would look similar to this. Majority of the crossings will receive rubber panels. They are more durable than asphalt and will last longer. That will prevent the need to come back in like 5-7 years and replace the crossing again. So a little bit about our plans. All the work will be performed on weekends. Each weekend we plan to replace on average 2 intersections. It may range from 1 to 3 based on complexity. So we expect the construction will take place over 15 to 17 weekends approximately, starting this June and ending next May. The May of next year, sorry. The bus will replace Green Line service on those weekends when we'll be doing construction. So the project is collaborating with our other currently scheduled projects to try to minimize the diversions and combine the efforts so we don't have as much impact on the community. So here's the schedule for June and July on Sea Line. We'll be starting work on at Hot Street on June 15th. Then we'll move on to Englewood Avenue and Winthrop Road on June 22nd weekend, and we'll work all the way through August 3rd, after which we'll go to Beeline. And the schedule is still being refined, and it can change. That's why I encourage everyone to stay connected. We have, and I'll talk about it a little bit later, we have multiple ways to stay connected and get updates on the project. So here's something to expect. As I said, Green Line service will be temporarily replaced by buses on Saturdays and Sundays when we'll be doing work on weekends. We plan to work from 1 a.m. on Saturdays till about 3 a.m. on Mondays to allow for regular service to start on Mondays at regular time. The bus will replace train service for full days Saturday and full day Sundays when we work. Road and track crossing will be temporarily closed during the weekends of our work, so there'll be traffic and pedestrian detours. Some lane closures and some parking spaces may be affected depending on the location. There will be some construction noise due to activities like removing pavement, cutting rails, distressing and tamping activities. But we're doing our best to minimize that noise, especially during nights. So we have several ways for the public to stay connected and learn about updates or get back to us with suggestions, with questions. We have a dedicated project website, mbta.com/GL-intersections. We also have an email where GL-intersections@mbta.com, where anyone can send comments, questions, communicate with us. And we also have a 24/7 project hotline number, 508-676-3598. Everyone is also welcome to, give us a call and, ask questions or leave comments. So every time we'll be doing work at certain locations, at least a week in advance, we'll distribute flyers in the vicinity of those locations, informing public of what we're doing, when we're doing it, so they're prepared. So neighboring residents and businesses will receive the flyers, and also the municipalities will receive the copy of the flyers when we distribute them. There's a way to get regular email updates every time something changes. On our webpage, there is a button where anyone can go in and subscribe for those email updates. If you're interested in staying updated, I encourage you to go in and sign up. And that's about it.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Ms. Howard?
As you probably know, Brookline is just about to put shovels in the ground and begin the building of a new facility for the high school at the Brookline Hills T-stop.
On the D line.
On the D-line. So I'm wondering whether you have yet a schedule of the D-line and the closures that are going to happen there.
For that specific project, Unfortunately, I'm not aware of the details because I'm not assigned to that particular project. But
D-line-
if
Isn't the D-line underground for
No,
most of its?
no, not in Brookline.
Oh,
There are
really?
no
But it-
at-grade crossings.
There are no at-grade
That's what I meant.
street crossings, so it's not subject to this
I mean
project.
underground, I meant below grade.
Well, in our project, we will be also working on some weekends, and we're partnering with the MBTA. We have a project manager with the MBTA, so that we're trying to minimize the number of nights and weekends that we will need to work. We want to do it at the same time that the MBTA is, so that disruption to the riders and to Brookline citizens is minimized to the greatest extent possible, so.
Yes, and Lisa Lepore, Senior Director of Transit Infrastructure with the
I
MBTA.
can't hear you.
That is correct. There is the project that regarding the D-Line branch, where we have another project ongoing. We are coordinating that project with this pedestrian crossing project. We also have track work that's going on. That project as well is being coordinated. Those three projects in sum all look at the diversion so that we can combine the weekend and the early access construction work onto the same bus service and minimize the disruption to the riders and to the community.
Yes, Ms. Hamilton.
Usually Nancy is the one to bring this up. So.
I know what you're going to ask.
Well, maybe not the way. So National Grid is doing a months-long project that has been very disruptive to the neighbors and the businesses within Washington Square. It's on the Sea Line, and they've been doing a lot of night work. So just wanted to make sure that you were aware that that construction project is going on. I think it's permitted until about November. So if you can try to do the work when they're doing it so that neighbors and businesses are not further inconvenienced, it's been quite difficult to try to manage expectations and
It's at the intersection of
Beacon
and Washington Street.
Square.
We'll mark that down.
And I see Mr. Ditto there. Do you have any other information about that project? I understand that the fact that they're able now to work at nights is hastening the pace so that it well may be done before November. Is that correct?
And now we're talking about the Washington.
Yeah, we're talking about the
and-
Washington Street
and
project.
Beacon Street.
Yeah, what I can do is hook these people up with Jim Backus.
Okay.
And we can make sure we're doing the best we can as far as getting everybody in and out as quickly as possible.
Great. And you aren't touching any gas lines or coming near any gas lines, right? Okay, just thought I'd ask.
One of the other struggles we've had with this National Grid project is the night work itself and the noise that it's generated. I note that this project is going to take place from 1 a.m. on Saturday to 3 a.m. on Mondays, and wondering, beyond flyering and having an email notification system, what measures you're taking to try and keep the noise down during the evening hours or the late night hours when residents of Brookline and other communities typically are fast asleep. So,
Well, there are multiple measures that the contractor will implement. For instance, they'll layer their dump trucks, so when they're dumping any material in their trucks, it doesn't make that metal loud noise. They'll try to minimize the truck beeping, like when it backs up, just only when it's needed for the workers' safety, and things like that. We'll do our best to minimize. Like, certain noise will still happen, but unnecessary noise will be minimized.
was there a conscious effort not to jackhammer to do the heavy pavement removal work during the early morning hours, to confine that work to the daylight hours on Saturday or Sunday?
We're doing our best. However, we are limited to a 50-hour work window, and sometimes we just can't, defer certain work to earlier or later hours because we have to return the service on Monday morning. So, but to the possible extent, we're trying.
Any other questions? Thank you. Okay, we are 10 minutes late, but next is the citizen complaint review. Ms. Nabel and Ms. Grace. Pardon?
It's going to be a public hearing as well.
Right. And this is a public hearing.
So we are back again. We have been here previously, and I think that there was a request that it be a public hearing because of the importance of the matter. So, and then there was a delay in wanting to give Chief Lipson time to review the report and make sure that he is comfortable with it as well. So I think I'd like to get that endorsement, if we can, here before, I guess, opening it up.
Good evening, Andy Lipson, Chief of Police. I know Bobby and Kelly did a tremendous amount of work on this process. They reviewed 41 complaints filed from 2013 to 2016, and were given access to over 1,000 pages of documents. Numerous meetings were held so that information could be provided and questions could be addressed. The complaints were reviewed and the general findings were included in their report. In addition to the complaints themselves, the policy itself was reviewed and a revised policy was created for your review. The recommended changes were made with the goal of making the policy less complicated, easier to understand, and the associated forms were updated. An enormous amount of work went into this effort, and I'd like to thank Kelly and Bobby for that work, as well as Lieutenant Campbell. And I've had a chance to review it, and I do support that finding. Thank you.
So the main change is it has a new, more concise name.
Yeah, that is one of the key things that we're asking for, is changing the name of the policy. If somebody wanted to make a complaint against the town and they were to look at the website to find out what's going to happen to this, how do I file a complaint, what's the process, I don't think they would ever find it under the current title of Police Discipline and Select Board, or at that time, Selectmen's Review Process. Has nothing to do with the complaints. And we have asked and we have agreed with, it was Chief O'Leary at the time, and with Lieutenant Campbell, that we take all the information that refers to police discipline out of that policy and that it all be consolidated. There are a lot more reasons that police officers are disciplined in the police department than having to do with citizens or civilian complaints. So those should be in a separate policy. They don't belong in this policy. And having it named what it is currently both makes it difficult to find and just is a misnomer. So, but there are a variety. We've asked her, there are a variety of changes, and you'll see in the policy that we've grouped them into 3 areas, which is that we've asked for the changes. So there are specific changes to the policy, changes to the policy itself, changes to the procedures, and changes to the wording. So we've tried to make that as simple as possible. And again, that those reasons were to simplify it for some of the changes that we've asked for to the policy are that they actually reflect what's currently done or what has been the practice. So getting that in there correct so that anybody filing a complaint does get accurate information on what's going to happen. But I guess I would summarize that the key recommendations are that we change the title, remove all sections regarding discipline, that we ensure equal access to the process, we remove the classes of complaints, that we include the chief diversity officer of the town in any bias cases, and then again, just changing the, some of the wording that's in there to make it more consistent with both some gender neutrality and things, removing the word citizen, so that nobody has the mistaken belief that you have to be a citizen in order to file a complaint or to be covered under this policy.
So I have one question regarding page 8, item 10. I see that we're receiving complaints through Twitter, Facebook, and other applications. Now, maybe I'm more 20th century, a more 20th century guy, but do we have privacy issues when we're using those type of social media platforms for complaints? I mean, I would assume that if you send a complaint through Twitter, that it's basically a public complaint. Is
Yeah,
that an issue?
I'm not a Twitter user, so again, we've put that in here to
Mr. Kleckner
reflect
says
what's
no.
actually being done. This was not a recommendation from us, but that Lieutenant Campbell had informed us that that is the way, some complaints come through those means, and we're accepting complaints any way that they come. So I deferred to Lieutenant Campbell to discuss whether, just how that works, and whether you discuss that with town council or...
Yeah, I can speak to that. Complaints can come in from Twitter either publicly or privately. If someone chooses to post something publicly, then confidentiality will be difficult, but they can send us a private message, and that can be kept confidential.
But you don't, when it's delivered publicly, you don't publish your results or discuss the case or in any other way in any public forum, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
We get some on Twitter, some posted on Facebook, and we reach out to them privately, and then the remainder of the interaction occurs privately.
Any other comments, questions?
I have a number of questions. Okay, so as I was reading through this, a few things I wanted a little bit of clarity on, and some other things I wanted to ask some deeper questions about. One, can you just catch me up to speed? This should be completed every 2 years. It was delayed from 2015 to 2017 because of unforeseen circumstances, and what those were.
There were a number of circumstances. Chief O'Leary was on a leave of absence for a period of time. I was on a leave of absence for a period of time. There were some issues regarding getting people to perform the function that Kelly and Bobby did.
Okay.
And so,
Do you feel like we have a process in place now to ensure that this happens on time when expected and going forward?
we're hopeful. The chief and I have been discussing this exact topic as recently as this week.
Okay. A couple of questions. Notice that it says the report did not include comparisons with comparable communities or civilian survey results. Second question on that. Why, and data from nearby or similar communities is either not available or is not consistent with the collection methodology in Brookline. So there's no way to see how we stack up, compare with nearby or other communities?
So what we found is, because the first time around, we did actually solicit that data, and what we found is it's not really an apples-to-apples comparison. Some communities don't have an internal affairs officer at all. They assign a citizen complaint to whatever detective or detective supervisor happens to be working. Others have just completely different processes, and our policy is relatively unique as far as it's very involved, very in-depth. Very few communities doing what we do, and so we got about 8 or 10 communities last time, and I don't think any of them were similar in tracking in the way that we do.
Okay. And what about the civilian? Did we actually reach out to anyone? And I understand that there's a difference between people being happy with the results and people being happy with the process. But did we reach out to any of the folks, these 74 people who made complaints during that time, to see what they thought about the process?
So I believe it was 74 total allegations and 41 complaints.
Okay.
As part of this, we did not We did not recontact any of the people who had gone through the process.
Okay, why not?
I don't have,
Yeah, it was just my understanding, it wasn't part of the process, and that wasn't in the scope of, it probably would be a good idea.
Okay. Yeah, and one of the things that struck me as I was reading this is that there's reasons why we're not doing things because of related to methodology, and then on the very next page, we cite this citizen survey, and we say we don't really we don't know the methodology of it, and that it's expected that it's representative of residents of the town of Brookline. Although it does not break down the responding populations by race or gender. And one reading this could see this and say, well, it seems like when it's convenient, you found some information that seems to indicate that we're doing a really good job, but we don't seem to be searching out any information that would put us in a place where it might say we're not doing a very good job. I also read in here later about how there's an indication that the number of complaints is really low, and one of the notes I made is compared to what? We don't have a comparison to know if it's very low. We might just think that's a small number, but we're not comparing it to really anything, so how do we know that it's actually low? So, these are some concerns as I read through this. It reads like we're sort of putting forward a story, and I'm not seeing enough data here that would lead me to reach the same conclusions.
The only part of that I can respond to is about the numbers. I think that one of the things that we noticed was that the numbers had gone down, that we couldn't tell whether that was the result of improved performance or just the fact that people were not reporting cases, and that we didn't, if that were so, we wouldn't know why. So it's a comparison to our own records and finding ways to make sure that it is inviting enough, easy enough for people to make complaints, that doesn't stand in the way of the numbers. So it wasn't making a judgment, it was merely that we couldn't be reassured by low numbers because we couldn't tell why that was.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? Comments? So, this is a public hearing. Any questions from the audience? Steve?
We do have some concerns with the accessibility. We don't believe this area is ADA compliant, so it would be a good idea to get somebody in to take a look.
Sure. What, you mean you're tripping over the lines there?
Sure, no, we'll look at that tomorrow. Yeah, we'll look at that tomorrow, I promise. Yep.
Seems like there's
Announce your
the
name
issues that
for the
we
audience.
Steve Vogel, Precinct 5. Seems like the issues that we were talking about now have to do with the reporting process within the town and to various departments or to the board. I was also interested in, does the town actually, in some summary form that is exclusive of details of individual cases, make a report to the public right to know, such as, well, there were 30 cases of people complaining of racially biased interactions, or walking while black, driving while black, or just getting a sense of the flavor of the complaints. Does the public, get that, or does it have the right to know that?
Well, the annual report, has that information, and it's summarized here in the memo from Bobby and Kelly. Do you want to elaborate on any more?
Yeah, I was just going to say, annual report, and I believe semi-annually, we produce a document, and you can find at least some of that information on our website.
But the entire report's posted on the website, correct?
I'm sorry?
The annual and the semi-annual report is posted on the website in its entirety.
That's correct.
Yeah, so it's a public document, it's on the police department's website, readily accessible.
Any other questions? Marty? Oh, Ms. Ames?
Maria Ames, resident of Brookline. 2 questions, please. Do complainants get investigated still by the police and are decided initially by the police? Or has that changed? And the
Sorry, I'm not
second
sure I
que-
understand the question.
So a citizen complainant files a report, files a complaint. Does that get investigated and decided by the police, by the police department still?
Do you want to walk us through the process for how the complaints are adjudicated and investigated and by whom?
Sure. And then I have a second question to follow up.
Okay, why don't you?
So how the process works is a person will come in and make a complaint or notify us. They'll submit something in writing, call us, whatever. They'll be given an opportunity to meet with me and be interviewed. The complaint will be investigated, witnesses interviewed. If there are video, other evidence, I'll do my best to locate that. I complete a report with my recommended findings. That report will be given to the chief of police to review. It also goes to the subject officer who's being complained against, and it goes to the complainant, the person who made the complaint as well. They then have 10 days to review that report. They can write a written response if there's something that I've missed, if they've given a witness, the name of a witness or some other evidence that I have not followed up on. At that time, they can point that out, and I will take the appropriate steps with regard to that. At the conclusion of the 10 days, if I have not heard anything from either party, then the chief will issue a letter with a final decision based on the investigative report. That information is then sent out to the subject officer and the complainant, along with an appeal form to whichever side, either the complainant or the police officer, whoever was adversely affected, and they have 21 days to appeal that to the board. That's essentially the process.
Can I ask you just a follow-up question on that? Is there, I'm looking at the complaint dispositions data there. Is there any way to compare sort of what we do in terms of finding something to be unfounded, sustained, not sustained, et cetera, compared to either a national data set or something more local?
You mean by like percentage? Like what
Sure.
has-
Yeah, like the kind of decisions we're making with this process versus other towns or municipalities with their processes.
There may be a way to just cold call. There doesn't appear to be any like centralized registry or anything like that. So it would involve calling.
Yeah, I assume different towns or cities have different ways of approaching complaints, so it'd be difficult to compare apples in Brookline to oranges in Oakland.
Right, yeah, I'm just wondering, thinking about how, now I was focused on the process before, now thinking about the results of it, and whether or not we are more or less likely than other municipalities when receiving a complaint of, you name the kind of discrimination, for instance, or excessive force or anything else on here, to sustain that complaint or not sustain it, for instance. You know, if that's something that we can find a way to compare to other municipalities, I think that might be helpful.
Okay, Ms. Ames, your second question?
Thank you. My second question is, what has been your participation in the appeal part of the complaint? So the specific question is, how many cases in the past 2 years, or even before, since 2009, I believe, have you heard and decided, I'll say against the police if it was appealed? by
Well,
the
I
citizen?
don't have the exact numbers, but there have been very few that have gotten to that level because the number of complaints is not that high. I understand that there are a couple of appeals that we appointed hearing officers to handle instead of the board, and went through the hearing officer process, and those are the only two I remember. So.
And is the hearing officer contemplated in the new procedure?
Yes.
It wasn't originally. Thank you for the answers.
I believe the idea of a hearing officer was contemplated in the original. Am I wrong on that, Kelly or Bobby?
It's in the original,
Yeah, so I thought.
report from the, report from before the one that we did, so it's been a part of it.
I didn't mean report, I meant actual procedure.
There was an account of that happening in the period before.
Okay, so
I think you're
my,
right.
my,
It was not part of the procedure, so we have now added it as, and even in specific circumstances.
Could people go to the microphone so we can hear?
go ahead.
Sorry, but from my recollection that it was not part of the original procedure and that, or it's not in the policy, but that we have added that it could be done, but only under specific circumstances.
Thank you for the specific circumstances. Otherwise, please explain to me what is the civilian oversight aside from the hearing officer, rather than the board and is superior to the chief of police.
Procedure. I think that one we did. Not exactly sure about that.
Is there a question there? Yes. Do you want to ask them again?
Yeah, I was consulting with town administrator on it.
The question is, what then is the civilian oversight by the selectman or anybody superior to the chief of police if you assign to just a hearing officer?
You make the ultimate decision.
Well, we make the ultimate decision.
Right,
And
and
that- and that's-
that's what we have added to the process, is that it does have, even if it's heard by somebody else, then it has to come back to the select board. And the select board has to make a final decision. Even if you make that decision in executive session, that does need to be reported publicly, the decision. The deliberations don't, but the decision does.
But that is a recommendation of the hearing officer. That is the recommendation of the hearing officer.
Correct.
Not actual direct knowledge with the complainant or witnesses.
Well,
On
the
appeal.
complainant is involved in the hearing process.
Right, but every time you simply get a report and a recommendation. You don't hear directly from the parties.
Is that
It's a public meeting often, and, my experience is the board does not necessarily rehear the case, but it does provide opportunities for some information and questions.
And there is an appeal process. People do have, even if it's heard by a hearing officer, they do have the right to have it heard by the select board, their appeal to be heard by the select board.
And so my last question then is, the decisions made by the select board on the appeal have been very few, and have those been in favor of the citizen or in favor of the police?
Yeah, I don't know.
There were not any in the 4
It's in the-
years that we reviewed.
I don't recall any since I've been on the board.
Yeah, there weren't any, and we reviewed 2013, 14, 15, and 16. So,
There weren't any,
and there were, no
Appeals.
appeals were heard by the select board.
Appeals are filed.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Rosenthal, any question?
Thank you. Yeah, Marty Rosenthal. I'm a town meeting member, Precinct 9, Chair of Brookline PACS, former member of the Select Board, and I actually brought a souvenir, one of the someday it'll be worth something, like police commissioner's badge, which got
Take that away from him.
discontinued
Put that away.
a couple of decades ago. No, we were never requested to give them back, and I've never shown it to anybody for anything but a snicker like this. So, as you know from one of my lengthy emails today, I don't believe that the public hearing process that's being used here is adequate for this. And when I co-authored the original report in 1987, which is one of my favorite accomplishments, at least alleged accomplishments by some, we emphasized the need for public input on police policies. And I have raised this issue a few times in the last decade, and I do believe that much more systematic outreach should be done for a real public hearing on something of this nature. One logistical quirk here is that if, for instance, a subcommittee of the advisory committee is holding a public hearing on a warrant article, a notice goes out, subcommittee holding public hearing. In this situation, what goes out is the select board's agenda on Friday. And if you don't look at it carefully, and I must confess, I'm sorry to say, I don't look at it carefully every Friday, you don't see a public hearing. So that's really not the
Marty,
kind of...
I hate to interrupt you. Can you just pull the microphone away from your shirt?
yeah.
I think you keep brushing up against
Here,
it.
put it closer.
Away from your
Away
shirt.
from your shirt.
Away from my shirt.
Yeah, you're just brushing up against it.
All right,
Sorry to
yeah,
interrupt
yeah.
you.
Okay, that's fine. So it's really even less notice of a public hearing than you get from some committees that are holding a segregated public hearing on a segregated topic, and a notice goes out, public hearing, and those on the electronic notice list, which was one of my ideas, will see that it's a public hearing. So I think that I really urge you to do a better job giving notice of this, and also disseminating the actual document that's going to be reviewed. I found it today on the website by hunting around. There was no link on the agenda, and I went to the agenda or something, I forget where I found it, but I did find it, and I actually found it last July when Ben and Kelly were kind enough to let me know about the report, and I did. I don't remember how I got it then, but I did get it, and I've had it, but I've been remiss in not looking at it carefully, because until, I think it's this morning, when Deborah Brown sent something out, it hit me. I hadn't noticed that this was coming up. So I really urge, I know that a tremendous amount of work has been done. I've looked at it carefully enough, which is not very carefully, but I could see right away that a tremendous amount of work was done by Kelly and Bobby, and I'm sure Chief, the department, the lieutenant, the former chief, the current chief, and I'm sorry to be the skunk at the garden party to say, let's hold off a little more. But I think it's worth it, to be honest. I mean, these police issues involve very careful consideration of community values. Maybe it's because this has been my life's work that I consider these issues of law enforcement to be really the heart of the values of a community. And the chances are what's in here is excellent, but I think the community ought to buy into that. One thing that's been mentioned today, which I have a question about, is the class of complaints. I was on the committee that reviewed all of this in 2008 or 9, I think it started in 8, and there was a change in the Class A, B, C stuff. And I dissented on that, and I brought a resolution to town meeting, and I was just trying to look and see the result. I don't remember what happened. But that's an issue that I think I'd like to look at what's in there now and give some feedback on the draft, but I haven't had a chance to do that. So that's basically all I'm going to say on the merits, because I haven't had a chance to look at this carefully. I'd love to do so. I'd like to add 2 more quick addenda.
Can I add on that? My understanding is that this is going to be incorporated into General Order 34.1, and that will be the final complaint process that is part of the police procedures, our policies and procedures. So I think there still is time to add input And I don't know, are you suggesting that we, pardon?
Nothing, sorry.
Are you suggesting that we have further hearings or that opportunity to add input before it's incorporated into this general order?
Well, I guess I'm not clear what you're talking about for the next step. I do know that what we did in 1987 was say that first of all, that there needed to be care in deciding what's a general order and what's a special order. But put that aside for the moment. We definitely said, and the unanimous select board agreed to everything, that policy issues, which are usually in general orders, ought to be decided finally by the select board.
And I think that's our process today.
And so I don't know if what you're suggesting is a second public hearing. This, to me, from your agenda, would be a long-awaited and justifiably, awaited public hearing to finally approve this thing. And
But what we're
that's where I differ, if that's what it really is.
So what we're approving, according to the agenda, is approving and adopting the civilian complaint process review report, which is, this document here. And that report includes recommendations with respect to the policy, which is General Order 34.1. So that policy will have to be updated to incorporate the report's recommendations.
But if you approve it tonight, I get the impression from the agenda that that's the final decision. It's just a matter of putting it in writing.
Well, we can hold open the final updating of the policy to allow people to give their comments.
Well, I guess you could, although it doesn't make a lot of sense to me that you would have the public hearing now and then do comments later. I mean, it seems to me it's putting the cart before the horse, that the public hearing ought to be before you take a vote. Maybe I'm missing something from your question, but it just seems to me that that's the monkey wrench that I'm trying to suggest is before you take a vote, you hear from the public, and you hear from the public that's been really asked to speak, not just thrown on the agenda like this. And I don't say that disrespectfully. I think it's basically an oversight. And so I don't mean to suggest there was anything wrong with doing that. I just think that, with all respect, you need a reminder, and that's what I'm here for. And this is not a new issue to me, as some of you know. I mean, I've been written up on. I know that the police policies were updated a few years ago through Herculean work by Chairman Green. Chair Green? Anyway.
Bernard Green.
Select board. Anyway, that was done, and I think I raised the same issues belatedly on that one too. So it's a more complicated process, I realize that, but I think on issues like this, it's worth it. I wanted to get back to two quick things that came up on other questions. When we looked at civilian review in 1987, we looked very carefully at it, and we had experts that were really knowledgeable in the field. We felt that this was a better way to do real civilian review, and that standing alone civilian review boards were almost universally, in fact, I think universally, deemed to be a failure. And we felt that this two-level process with the selectmen, sorry to date myself, so select board being a second level and being police commissioners was a better way to do it, and that was real and more meaningful civilian review, because there at that time, and I'm not sure this has changed, were no civilian review boards that were separate from the executive branch that were really being effective. And I think that's been a chronic problem ever since. So that's number one. And the other thing I wanted to get back to is I think that certainly from 1987, which is now, 32 years ago, Lieutenant Campbell was right. At that time, there was very little data anywhere. And I'm not sure there is much more now. So to compare what's happening in Brookline is hard. The one thing I know for certain is, and I say this in some modesty, that this is a better process than almost any place. And I know that a little by dealing with police all over the state. So at least it's spelled out in writing. At least people look at it every few years. It's changed, which is good. And I still think, I hate to say it, I'm kind of proud of it. So that's it.
Thank you.
Can I ask a quick question? What this report?
That's one of the things we do want to encourage. So we read the cases or the complaints through the end of 2017. So we do suggest that 2 new people be appointed to read the cases for, we read the cases through the end of 2016. So 2017 and 2018 should be read to keep it at a biannual process. Don't let it go for extenuating circumstances. Don't let it go beyond that. People should be starting on this process now. So.
I also thought it might be useful for you to know a little bit more about the details of our operation. We were given copies of the reports. The reports are actually quite detailed about the initial encounter and the report that was made to Lieutenant Campbell, as well as not only his interview of the person making the complaint, but the officer to whom he spoke, or officers. We read those reports, which, and I will say that they seem to be pretty thorough and comprehensive to us. But if we had any questions, we asked those questions of Lieutenant Campbell. We also read them separately, and we came together to compare our own reactions to them, to find whether we were in agreement or not, or if there were differences in our perspective. Certainly for me, this was not a part of my general experience, so I did not bring with this a perspective other than that of a civilian. And I think the fact that what we found after the kind of quite careful reading of the individual cases, our conversations and comparisons of our responses, that we found ourselves not differing with the conclusions reached in the initial investigation in most cases. So that there were relatively few cases in which we thought there might have been a different response. We were conscious of issues of race and looked to see what signs, if any, there were in those about how people were treated or how the cases were decided. What we found in a quite small number, a handful of cases, that it was possible that race might have had some role in the decision, but that it was not clear-cut. It was something that, in fact, the police could use sometimes if they wished in their training to raise similar issues, taking out any racial differences that might exist to see whether the responses might be different. But we did not, in those instances, have a clear indication that race determined the behavior. That didn't mean that we thought that the behavior of the officer was something that we would condone. At any rate, I think that it's important for you to know that we did approach this starting from scratch without a set of views about being on a particular side or having a particular perspective in behalf of the town, rather than thinking of this as an issue of importance, and that we were to be the neutral eyes of those appointed to take on this role.
Any other questions? Comments? Ms. Brown?
Deborah Brown. First, I want to apologize for getting kind of grouchy around the women and minority-owned business issues. I did it on and off for 30 years, and there's like real information out there on how to do it, and I just feel like we have missed some real opportunities in this town, and I would like to see it end. With respect to citizen review boards, Mr. Rosenthal, I think, I came up to talk about the need for more community engagement around this actual report. I was not sophisticated enough for it to pop right up on my screen, but I think it would really be helpful if we did treat it like we do a warrant article and just set aside an evening so people can come in and hear what folks have to say before, it's a done deal. And, Raul, to your point, you were asking if, you could identify any trends or anything like that. When I was looking at the 2018 report, I noticed that approximately 17% of the people that were stopped by the police in Brookline were residents, and approximately 82% were not. Well, if a subset of this number is actually the group that files the complaint, then I would assume that it's more likely than not that those people don't even live in Brookline. And so they're not necessarily going to have an incentive once they've lost, to file an appeal. In fact, they may just say, even before they get to file a complaint, I will just drive around Brookline. I won't go through Brookline. I won't do business in Brookline. And so there may be another layer of analysis there that I would encourage you all to look at, because you do have enough data to, I think, to at least begin to explore who's getting stopped and what that means for purposes of the complaint process. The other thing that just in terms of communications, wouldn't it be novel to actually start issuing press releases once a year around this document? If it's good news or bad news, I think that it's a real opportunity for at least people to have a sense that you guys are being as transparent as humanly possible. But just posting it on your website doesn't necessarily get people. It doesn't inform the conversation. And what people will typically do is just react from their gut. And depending on who you are, all police are good, all police are bad. And I think that you all deserve a better analysis than that. You all deserve more than that. And so I also wanted to ask a couple questions. One, were all the cases included? Like, I guess the Walgreens case was an incident that happened a while back, and whether that's included in the summary. And also, can we estimate what the actual cost of these complaints is to the town? I mean, actual costs? Because that, in and of itself, should be one of those factors that we're trying to look at. Is there a financial cost to the community? So, those are my comments in a nutshell. But I would really look forward to having an opportunity to look in depth at the actual document and sharing it with, in particular, other people of color in Brookline who I am sure have a real interest in seeing this.
Ms. Frawley.
Regina Frawley, town meeting member from Precinct 16. And as I looked around the room, and there especially, and even with the chief, I'm probably the only person with perspective for 19 years who've been coming here and know whether or not the complaints have been here, and the answer is no. You get a report by the chief, usually, in my opinion, it was really once a year, and he would tell you there were X number of complaints, and with almost no exception, the recommendation was they were not sustained. And that's all you got to hear. You just got to hear that report. I'm not as sanguine as Bobby Nabel is about the reports because anybody, excuse me?
Pardon
Thank
me?
you. I see you were talking. I wanted your attention.
Excuse me, I was consulting with the town administrator.
I'll wait
Okay.
when you're done. It's respectful to listen to the people who've come to a hearing. So you haven't had those, you sit there and you hear usually an oral report, there might be a minor paper that comes in, and then you say, okay. In all these years, I've only heard of a couple of sustained complaints. One that I remember involved a Brookline policeman who had a domestic issue. Maybe there were two domestic issues, and that went all the way to your Board of Selectmen in executive session, and he chose to make it an open session, and so the room was filled with police people in particular. There was enough evidence there, and it did come down to evidence that it was not sustained. He was fired. Having said that, it comes down to almost every single complaint, year in and year out, I heard about was summarized with unsustained because there was no evidence. It was he said, she said situation. That is really at the base of the problem, is we need the kinds of devices, especially the cameras, both in the cruisers as well, front and back, as well as on the lapels, that I know that the unions have been very want to include, but that's where the evidence is going to come. And I can recall one of the complaints was somebody was filming an interaction, this was years ago, and they were told, you can't do that. And the person didn't know that, in fact, they could do it. So they shut the camera off, and then whatever happened, happened. I'm also unclear, did your committee have a public hearing when you drafted this? No. About,
We came to the select board over a year, and Marty was here, asked me to make a decision tonight, but can we have a public hearing? And that's why everything has been delayed for a very long time. We submitted this report
Okay.
in January of 2018.
okay. Having said that, if a few of you might remember, not that many years ago, the traffic calming also met secretly, just without ever announcing it, and it accidentally came to my attention that they had a draft report ready to go. I filed a complaint with town council, at the time Jennifer DePazzo. She investigated. Within 24 hours, she told them to throw it in the trash because it wasn't done properly without public hearing and public meetings where we could observe. They then had to start de novo, and what happened was a couple of us went who had some experience with traffic calming, and at the end of the process, they wrote a new report and thanked us because it was better because of the public input. So if there's any chance for this delay tonight, and I think it's a choice you can make, I would say delay it, go have a couple of public hearings. And I would like to make one more comment to the confidence I was hearing out of Bobby Nabel about the reports. Anybody who's ever filed a complaint to the Brookline police, perhaps any police, you should read what they write. I had a theft at my house months ago. I caught the thief. He was leaving my backyard. He was dressed like a ninja, all black. I reported it. I had the police come. They had somebody else call me. That's another story. That person said, oh, so he was wearing plaid. You said he was wearing plaid. That never came out of my mouth. Never, because he was in solid black and even had a pull tight. I would recognize the guy. you just don't control what you read, but it can read really, really well and very convincing, but it doesn't mean it's fact-based. And so the opportunity for the complainant should be included in this, and maybe it is. I'm only seeing it tonight for the first time, so I haven't had a chance to read it. And that's another reason why it shouldn't be voted on tonight. But the complainant should always see what, in fact, was submitted, because it may not reflect anything that person said. And if it wasn't recorded, it's another he said, she said. Now, whether that's intentional on the part of the police person writing it in or just that they're not good listeners, I can't say. All I know is I've seen mistakes myself, and I think it's very important that complainants have that opportunity. Thank you.
Any other comments? Ms. Ames. Oh, Bobby.
Excuse me, I think my understanding was, or what I said was that the police reports are written, that the person is interviewed, but I think that Paul said that he sends a copy to the person who submits the complaint, and the person has an opportunity to make some changes in that if they choose.
Yes.
Thank you. Before I forget, the question for the authors of the report is, why is it that you did not include the case of the Walgreens, which happened in 2016, and what happened with it? And before you answer, please give me the chance to highlight what you initially suggested, Raul, and that is also in response to Regina's point to interview the people who filed this complaint. And perhaps there is an opportunity to either review a video of a number of people who came personally before the selectmen in 2015, I believe, or seek the specific input of those who filed complaints and hear from them, and also invite the public to a hearing. Anyway, thank you. And I hope to hear your answer about the Walgreens.
Well, the Walgreen report wouldn't have been in that.
Yeah, we have no information about a Walgreen report. We do. Your husband had asked me specifically if I had read a case from July of 2016, and I had told him that no, we didn't. And so we understand that there was quite a large settlement, I believe $175,000 settlement, something like that, or maybe that's the case that I'm talking about at least. We would want to make sure that if we were told that because that case was in litigation, it was still pending, that it was not included in the complaints that we read.
Right.
We would ask that any complaints that had come or had been closed during the time, again, we want to encourage that the 2017, 2018 complaints be reviewed starting very soon, and that any of those cases that I don't know if there are any other cases, but that they be included in that process, that it should not matter how cases don't have to be said. They come through tweets or Facebook, and there are all kinds of ways they get investigated. Just because they come through someone's lawyer, just because it turns into litigation, I think if there are any police complaints, they all should be taken as a whole and reviewed as a whole. One of the things that we did do was look at that the police department did provide information. So if there was a complaint against someone, we saw the record of that police officer, and some of those records went back to the early 80s. So we were able to see if there was any kind of a pattern amongst any police officers and what the nature of that complaint, how many complaints, things like that. So we were looking at whether an officer had a history and judging outside of those time periods. We did not see it. We have no idea. We have no idea who the officer is or what is or what Walgreens has to do with it.
Okay, so I'd like to close the hearing. In terms of going forward, I guess I would suggest we not vote tonight on the report and maybe give people an opportunity to make comments to the policy. Now, remember, two separate things. The report, which I don't think we have any real objections to, and secondly, the policy, General Order 34.1. But what we'll do is put the policy and the report online and ask people to, give us their comments, and at a future meeting, we'll have a more open public hearing to address Mr. Rosenthal's comments. Anyone?
Sure, if
have a
I can
problem
add
with
something
that?
there. Yeah, well, I don't know about a problem with that, but I would think very differently about the actual review itself. I do have problems with the review. I think it's, this is about the public confidence in this review process. I mean, for us, the public needs to have trust in us, and the public especially needs to have trust in those that we have given the license to perform the duties of officers on the streets. This to me, like when I saw this, the first thing I thought was, why is this so light? I would imagine a review like this would be at least twice the number of pages here. I think there are things that could and should have been explained more, and maybe still could. I would advocate for a revise and resubmit, which is something in academia that we often get asked to do. But the idea of not explaining why this report is 2 years late and just saying there were unforeseen circumstances is inadequate. Not really fully explaining why we cannot compare our data to any other data that exists in the known universe is inadequate. Why we didn't actually interview anyone who submitted a complaint over the course of those 3 years, and some of the other, in terms of the data itself here, you mentioned that there were no appeals that were heard by the select board during this time. If that's the case, that is something that would be important to include as part of this report. Generally speaking, when we have data tables like this, there's also an explanation of what people are reading in these data tables, and none of that exists here. And this is just, with all due respect to the folks that were involved in putting this together and the great intentions of doing this work. I mean, I just think this reading this does not give me confidence in this, in the policy, in understanding that the policy as it is, with the recommendations that come up in this review, is actually the policy that we should have. And I think that if and when we do get to a place where there are more public comment or hearings on this, I think we're going to hear more of that.
Okay, what's the desire of the board on this?
Well, I think the right step is to, we often don't vote on a matter that comes before us in a public hearing. The night of the public hearing, we give it time for the public to review it and comment on it and suggest changes. So I think that's what you're proposing, and I agree with it. And to the extent that people have issues with either the content of the report or the policies, they can make the comments about it at that time.
Right.
So I agree, holding off is the appropriate action. I don't want to lose the thread of, we've got the past 2 years, 2017 and 2018, to review, and it would seem inappropriate to launch that process until we conclude this process, which I hope would be soon, but let's not let it drag for another 2 years, to Raoul's point. Let's close the books on this in the relative near future after taking a pause, but let's then quickly, as a group, appoint new individuals to take a look at those past 2 years of complaints, and to Raoul's point, perhaps give them a little bit more instruction about what we expect the committee to do and the process we expect them to go through.
Okay, and that, part of that is maybe revising the general order, because that's where the instructions to the two individuals selected comes from. So I don't want to blame Bobby and Kelly for now, I know
But that
you're not
wasn't
doing
my
that.
intention.
Okay, but no one should blame Bobby and Kelly for this. to the extent that there are issues in the report, but to the extent that there are issues in the report, we need to tighten up the general order itself with respect to directing the chief to appoint people to do this review. So we'll put this off for some time. And thank you to Bobby Nabel and Kelly Race.
Thank you.
Okay, we have another public hearing. I'm sorry, but this is 40 minutes late, but I'm sure you're here and seeing why that happened. Yeah. CDBG Annual Action Plan. Mr. Viola again.
Good evening, Joe Viola, Assistant Director for Community Planning. And yes, tonight's public hearing is related to the town's fiscal 2020 CDBG Annual Action Plan. As a CDBG subrecipient, we're required by the town, or by HUD, to undertake a public process which includes seeking public comment on the use of our federal funds. So to that end, in April, planning staff placed a legal notice advertising the availability of our annual action plan and inviting the public to review and comment, and that ad included a date for this public hearing. So we, in advance, provided notice of tonight's public hearing. Every year following our 30-day public comment period, we request that the Select Board hold a public hearing to allow for a final opportunity for public comment on the annual action plan. The action plan itself provides the public and our representatives at HUD with information on how the town will use its CDBG funding over the course of the upcoming fiscal year. After tonight's hearing and vote, we'll finalize the document to reflect additional public comment that we receive prior to submitting it to HUD so that we can include those comments in the report or in the plan. After HUD approval, grant admin staff will move towards other programmatic responsibilities that we have, including preparing contracts for grantees and for which we'll be back before the board at a later date. Just to give the board an overview of the process, that began this past February when staff released a request for proposals for prospective CDBG recipients. The town's CDBG Advisory Committee, which is chaired by Select Board Member Franco, reviewed applications and deliberated over funding recommendations at two public hearings held on February 25th and the 27th. To inform the committee's budget deliberations, we followed HUD's direction to utilize a $1.4 million level funding as the committee tried to formulate its recommendations. They used that amount not knowing what our actual our allocation would be. As of May, we were notified that the allocation was lower than expected at around $1.37 million, which is actually a cut of $40,000 from last year, which is not a great thing. The board received, I know you received the committee's recommendations in your packet for tonight. Those recommendations include adjustments to the allocation of individual grantees due to the $40,000 funding decrease. The adjustments are based on direction received by the committee during budget deliberations. So how did the committee recommend we deal with a potential cut? Related to public services, the recommendation reflects the committee's wishes that in the event of a decrease, public service activities would bear the cut equally. I think every program received approximately $850 less than what the initial committee recommendation was. And the reason for that is our public services are capped at 15%. We can't allocate more than 15% of the grant toward public service activities. Related to administration and planning, housing, and community facilities, the committee recommended a cut to those categories equal to the percentage cut from the allocation, which was approximately 3%. The programs funded for fiscal 20 in addition to our 7 public services, were capital improvement projects at 2 Brookline Housing Authority developments for some door, and there's issues with some of their exterior doors that they're replacing. Our affordable housing renovation project, BIX project at 154, 156 Beacon Street, they're actually doing some substantial renovations, including some replacement of fire and smoke detectors. They're hardwiring them, so there's some energy efficiency repairs that are being done, as well as some public safety improvements. Another program that was funded was for HVAC renovations at the Brookline, what was formerly known as the Brookline Community Mental Health Center is now known as the Brookline Center. Funding for technical and legal services for the Kent Street project I know the board authorized the issuance of that RFP sometime back. The RFP will be issued shortly, and we'll have some funding for services needed to move that project towards completion. Finally, funding for construction phases services for the Gateway East project. You heard about that earlier. Part of this year's allocation will be utilized along with some other funding to fund those services that you heard us talk about earlier. The electrical engineering, civil engineering, and landscape architect construction phase services. So I just wanted to give the board a brief overview. I know you've seen the committee recommendation, an overview of how we got to tonight. What the objective is the plan has been available for a month, and in the event that the board or other members of the public have questions about anything within the plan or any other comments, it's our duty as the grant administrator to record those and include them along with the annual action plan.
So as the chair of the committee, I just want to add additional color to what Mr. Viola described as the advisory committee's process. So to be clear, we only have $1.3 million to hand out, and there are some restrictions imposed by HUD about how that money is divided between different types of services. There was, as is typically the case, more requests for dollars than there are available. We had requests totaling over $1.7 million. So we were not able to fulfill everybody's request for funding. And the committee had some hard choices to make. You heard that we had 2 nights of hearings. At those hearings, we reviewed not only the written applications from the applicants, but also had an opportunity to interview those applicants to get some additional information and ask some probing questions. At the table, on that advisory committee, myself as chair, obviously representing the select board, but there were also representatives from the Housing Advisory Board, from the Brookline Community Foundation, from the school committee. There was a resident of the Housing Authority. So we made a genuine effort to try and be inclusive of a variety of different perspectives and users of these services. And what you have before you is an agreed upon recommendation. This time around, I was the chair of this group last year as well. We spent a great deal of time debating the division of the pot of money between services and recipients. And I think members of the public who did attend that hearing were complimentary and reassured by the fact that it was a process, there was give and take by everybody, and came up with a fair division of funds. Of course, we wish we could have given everybody the funds they were looking for to enable the work, but unfortunately, the amount of dollars that we had was less than the need that was articulated by the recipients that you see before you in the recommendation.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? This is a public hearing. Any public comment desired? Ms. Brown.
Yes, Deborah Brown. And I actually received notice about this RFP. So that, my experience in Brookline is extremely unusual. I am going to suggest, though, going forward, and maybe I'll write this up, but that my experience is that with the federal government, you have like a list of people that you just routinely email things to, notices, and then that way you hit a diverse body, but you may not have gotten a depth, and that this might actually ensure some depth. I will say that my tour of public housing, one of the complaints that I heard over and over again were the doors that did not work. And that was a senior housing where one night I was walking home and I literally pulled the door closed myself. And just in terms of some of the homes within the buildings themselves where the doors just looked like people had tried breaking in so many times that it wasn't safe. I think, the only thing that I'd like to figure out is, like I'm looking at the Brookline Center, their roof. Are you telling me that there are so many people that use the Brookline Center that it falls under the caption of moderate, low to moderate income? It meets the threshold. And so, I just have some questions like that, or, using the money to pay legal services. As a lawyer, I should be the last one complaining about legal fees, but I will. And, the project off Boylston Street, it pains me to see community development block grant money used there when, they're probably, you didn't get the applications likely, but I suspect that there are greater needs and than helping Children's Hospital navigate, that project over there. And I know the town will benefit, but I also feel like that there are other resources that could help defray some of the infrastructure costs instead of using block grant money. So I just wanted to put that on the record.
Thank you. And let me just respond by saying I agree that we should be distributing these applications far and wide, and I look forward to getting suggestions from you about how we can achieve that goal. So please feel free to let me know if you've got suggestions about how we distribute the application, the RFP more widely. I think we share a goal of making sure that everybody's aware of these dollars, and I think together we can get closer and closer incrementally to achieving that goal.
And my point was, you guys did a pretty good job, but I think it's like a town-wide, what does the community involvement strategy look like in general? And how do we ensure that each department around major issues actually implements that plan? You created your own, and it's not too afield from what most people will do. My issue is that when I look at the individual, where the money is being expended, if I'm HUD, somewhere in the back of my head, I'm not sure if you came in August 1 and said, can I have some of your extramural dollars that haven't necessarily, been allocated? I would look at what you have on paper and say, you got to be kidding me.
So I take your point and look forward to future conversations. I will say that the Housing Authority is getting $350,000, is proposed to get $350,000 to address the very issue that you articulated around the doors and locks. So I hear you, I agree with you, the committee agrees with you, and we're going to give the Housing Authority some dollars to address that issue. On the topic of Gateway East and Boylston Street, I think that project benefits more than just Children's Hospital. I think it benefits residents of the High Street building, Housing Authority building. I live in the general area and go through that area 5 days a week going to work. And every day I see one, if not more people, crossing Boylston Street where there will be a at-grade crossing. So I think I take what you say at face value. I think that that this project is not only going to beautify and help to make the intersection more functional and welcoming of people, it's also going to help some of the very people that we share a concern for and want to benefit.
And lastly, generally what happens when you make those kinds of improvements, you end up with gentrification. So that's the other piece of it, but we should talk about other funding sources
Yep.
for that kind of work going forward.
So,
Ms. Frawley.
Gina Frawley, Precinct 16. It is a task that you're attempting, and she's right. The more you fix using those funds that are allocated for less well-situated situations, you improve the neighborhood, and pretty soon your competition is greater for the fund. It is a regional fund. It's a consortium. We've done very, very well over the years. But it is the last 2 years, the rules and regulations have been challenged in Washington, reduced. It's harder. The pot is tougher to get your hands on. Some of Deborah's suggestions are very helpful, and you're right on top of that. Gail Lewis did a fabulous job over the years. I don't know even if she could, and she was full-time on this. I don't even know if she could handle the last 2 years' administration in Washington. But we need to do exactly that, figure out the areas. I'm not sure who the lawyer you're referring to is, but I know they have a legal service at the senior center for free for people to come from time to time. And so maybe that's part of what they meant by the legal services being covered by CDBG. I don't know. But there are some things that go on at the senior center that wouldn't happen without that money. So I'm not here to complain, and I'm not even here to make any more of a more global umbrella suggestion that you need to tighten your belts for this administration, and you do need to be more specific in order to fight for that consortium fund, because the other communities are now getting more than they did a few years ago. And places like Waltham, they look like they needed it far more than us, and we were getting more out of the pie than they were over different years. So good luck. It's a very worthwhile thing.
Any more questions from the audience? Any questions from the board? So, I move to for approval of the Community Develop Block Grant Annual Action Plan.
So
Is there a Franco?
I think there are three different motions. Okay. So the motion is to approve submitting the FY 2020 CDBG action plan. Is that?
All right.
Okay. So I vote aye.
Pardon me?
I vote aye.
I haven't finished yet.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Approval of the CDBG Annual Action Plan comprised of approving submission of the fiscal year 2020 Annual Action Plan to HUD, authorizing the chair to execute the application for federal assistance, Form SF 424, and other certifications required for submission of the fiscal year 2020 Annual Action Plan, and authorizing the Director of Planning and Community Development to execute required environmental review documents on behalf of the town for CDBG-funded projects. All in favor? Mr. Franco?
Aye.
Ms. Heller?
Aye.
Ms. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Fernandez?
Aye.
Chair votes aye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Franco. Okay. Open Space and Recreation Plan Review. I see Mr. Brady in the audience. Yeah. And Conservation Committee Commissioners. So let me start out by saying the town's open space and recreation plan is being presented to the select board tonight for our consideration by Mr. Brady. It's been approved in draft form by the State Division of Conservation Services and Mr. Brady will discuss its purpose and process used to produce the plan. I've served as co-chair along with Werner Lowy and Pallavi Kiliamande, both of whom are on the town's Conservation Commission. I understand that Werner is going to discuss sustainability issues as they relate to the plan, and Pallavi will discuss one of the management goals of the plan, better coordination to protect open space in the context of the other priorities of the town. So after the presentation, we can either vote tonight to approve the plan, or we can vote next week if you want, to give you an opportunity to review the plan in depth, which is on the town's website. So I'll raise that after presentation by Mr. Brady. Tom.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the board, it's good to be with you tonight. It's good to see all of you. As you know, I'm the Conservation Administrator, the Tree Ward in the Town Arbors for the community. I'm here tonight. My role is the Conservation Administrator. And in approximately 12 to 13 minutes, we're going to try and educate you top to bottom, front to back on what an open space plan is, why we need one, and what we hope to accomplish. Most importantly, the Open Space and Recreation Plan is a regulatory requirement set forth by the Division of Conservation Services. That is an agency within the Massachusetts Executive Office of Environmental Affairs. They set forth in their planning document what they feel the importance of the document is and why it should take place. And it was interesting in reviewing the text on the screen, which is, I think it's really summarized in terms of the planning process, where we are, where we'd like to go, and how we might get there. In preparation for this presentation tonight, we took a look at plans from the past. We went all the way back to 1976. And the plan from 1976 has this language in it almost verbatim, which is interesting. As set forth in the planner's handbook, from their point of view, the Open Space and Recreation Plan is a powerful instrument to affect community goals. And I will tell you, this is my 20th year with the community, and I'm very pleased and fortunate to say that the Open Space Plan has consistently been a point of reference and a point of observation and reflection for the community as opportunities set forth. So we're glad to see that. How it works, we talked about a little bit briefly, is that we need to prepare this document, is reviewed, and then is approved by the Massachusetts Division of Conservation Services. There are several grants, programs that the town utilizes where this is a requirement, and if you do not have an approved open space and recreation plan, you are not allowed to access those funds. Projects that have accessed those funds in the past have included Skyline Park, where we had the former landfill, the Fisher Hill Reservoir, where we acquired the old reservoir and renovated and created parklands, and currently the Brookline Reservoir project. The Division of Conservation Services, in fact, sets forth in great detail exactly which sections we will have and what will be contained within those sections. There is a planner's handbook that's approximately 40 pages in length to guide you through that process. There is staff at the Division of Conservation Services that we will check in on as we move through the process to make sure that we are in compliance with their requirements. And at the core of this, what is open space? This open space definition is one that has held relatively stable for the past 3 plans with a little bit of tweaks here and there. It speaks to the variety of open space that we have in Brookline, which sometimes does surprise folks because, in fact, we do have land that is utilized for farming. We obviously have land that is used for recreational use, and we do have lands that are sustained in conservation purposes in a minimally managed condition. A good example of that is directly across from the reservoir. When you drive out Route 9 on the right-hand side, is kind of a big meadow setting on the back side of the stone wall. That's actually under conservation restriction. And the reason for that is because it serves that purpose to provide an open view shed. The committee itself was comprised of 19 members. Now, that's a big committee in of itself. And I had co-chairs, terrific co-chairs of Select Person Green, Werner Lowy, Pallavi Monday from the Conservation Commission. But each one of those 19 people represents a different committee. We had the advisory committee with Amy Hummel, We had John Dempsey from Bicycle Advisory, Alicia Yanover. We had Deborah Rivers, Lou Edgers, Frank Carroll, Carol Levin, Bob Cook, Dave Pollock, Ali Talley from the Transportation Board, Liz Urban from the Tree Planting Committee. So those 19 people all brought their board's thoughts and experiences to the table. We further broke that working group, that down into 4 working groups, which is open space protection and zoning, greenways, infrastructure and resource protection, and climate change. And it's exactly as it sounds. It's intended to be 4 broad categories to try and capture people's expertise. I would also note we went through 2 staff changes through this process. As you all know, it takes some time to recuperate and get new staff people in place. So we're very grateful to Brittany Bonney, who cannot be with us because she's no longer here. She left, and her and her husband had a family, which is great. And Katie Weatherseed, who's our current conservation assistant, who has stepped in and really done yeoman service. Ironically enough, during the process, in investigating open space, I got bit by a tick, and I got Lyme disease. So another open space piece. So just kind of goes through the process. It has been a process. It's been a 3.5-year planning process. I will tell you the last 6 months has been us on our administrative side working through the approval process at the state, because we have to do that before we bring that to the board. We have 31 meetings in total, 12 meetings of the whole, 16 working group meetings. To gather information at the very beginning of the process way back in, we had 3 public forums. Those public forums are sprinkled throughout the community. I would also note that they're also specifically located to make sure we get the environmental justice neighborhoods involved in the mix, and we make sure we get that buy-in and that discussion. As I just talked about, before it comes to you, the final draft plan is approved by the Open Space Committee as the whole, the 19, the Conservation Commission of 7, and it needs to go to the Division of Conservation Services while they go through it. And our plans are consistently held up as a good example, a good model of what a plan should look like and how it should function to other communities. We're very pleased and proud about that. And it has to go to the Metropolitan Area Planning Council. That's the second staff change I talked about. Just as this was going to them, the person who reviewed the plans left the MAPC. So we spent 3 months having a series of increasingly intense phone discussions till we got our final review process, which they were very happy about. Let's talk about some broad numbers real quick. Here's some great news. This was traditionally a 5-year plan. We just said it was a 3.5-year process for planning. In Brookline, that's about what it takes to get through the open space plan process. This last time, they changed it to a 7-year plan, which makes us very happy. So the goals and objectives that we laid out will get us through 7 years. Last time, the document was about 190 pages. We had about 28 goals, and we got 2 marching orders. One was to reduce the number of goals overall for the 5-year plan, and the second was to reduce the size of the plan. Well, we hit one, we didn't hit the other. And I'm going to tell you why real quick. On the pages side of the equation, we're going to show you some examples. The inventory of lands that we had, the inventory information that you have for each one of the parcels that we own, was the level of detail increased exponentially, and we're going to show you that as an example. So that alone added 100 pages to the document. The other thing that changed that was quite substantial is that previously you did not have to include the American with Disabilities Act evaluation, access self-evaluation. You had to state that you completed it, but not include it. Now it's included in the plan. Last time we had 25 maps, this time 27, so not so bad. Overall, it's good. But keep in mind the goals and objectives. Last time we had 28 goals and objectives for 5 years. This time we went to 7 years and we have 26. So we expanded that a little bit, and we were happy to see that. That was part of the marching orders. Let's give you an example real quick of that inventory I talked about. This is one of those requirements that I spoke of. We must have an inventory for each and every one of the properties that we own as open space. That is a requirement. This is what we had previously, which is pretty typical. It starts at the top with what the property is, the size, the overview, a little bit of park history, and some deed and title restriction down the bottom. Now, at the time this last plan was done, back in 2010, we also had completed a parallel document, which was called the Parks and Open Space Strategic Plan. That was really a facilities-based planning document. The direction we got from the state was crystal clear. We want those two merged together. So we did that. We also, as the board knows, have had a lot of discussion about deed and title issues throughout the community. I want to thank in particular Commissioner Schnorr and Commissioner Harvey, who are with us, who are both from the Conservation Commission and our council, and took this task on and spent many hours buried in the engineering vault, working with Peter Ditto and working with Tracy, who used to be upstairs in legal counsel, digging through those deeds and title restrictions. So what we end up with now for Lars Anderson Park are 5 pages of information. The park in its entirety, a GIS map, defined boundaries, the deed and title restrictions which we have available, all the information on physical attributes such as benches, trash receptacles, picnic tables, all those types of things. This type of information is now available for each and every piece of open space in the plan. That was a big reason that the plan increased, but it's a much more thorough and much more comprehensive look at each one of the properties. We find a big piece of the plan are the maps that we include. As you all know, I'm sure our GIS folks, although they are a smaller number, are doing incredible work for the town. This plan was no exception. This is existing land use. And what I always find when I look at this map is when I look at the open space, which is the bright green, it's striking to me the amount of open space that we have sprinkled fairly consistently across the community. You take out that big green chunk in the middle, which are all the golf courses clustered together. I think it works pretty well. It gives you a good read. But then we take it into further detail, and we break it down by watersheds, and we take a look at watersheds in Brookline. And we have just the mapping and the tools and the information that we have available when we're trying to pull this plan together is pretty incredible. These are all the watersheds along with all the catch basins, along with all the drain lines, so we can see how we drain, what goes to the muddy, what does not, how the watersheds are broken up. It's an amazing process as you look through it. Not many folks know that if you happen to drop your water bottle outside Pino's Pizza and the water goes down the drain, you can follow it. It's going to come out at Leverett Pond down here pretty quickly. It's a pretty long run. But that all information is all mapped. And this is, when we talk about those 4 working groups, these are the type of information and the types of analytical exercises they went through when they were looking at how do we protect the watersheds? How do we protect those water resources? How do we make sure that our rivers and streams are maintained and protected for future generations? We then took it a step further down and went down to water and wetland resources map. And you can see that our water and wetland resources here are dispersed. They're not quite as widespread throughout the community. You'll see the big blue watershed right in the middle, which is the reservoir, which if you've been by, you know that the water level is much lower right now due to the ongoing project. But you'll note that one of our boundaries with our city, the city of Boston, is defined by the Muddy River. And finally, for maps, this is our open space map. I am thrilled that in the time I've been here, thanks to the leadership of many folks, including Ms. Galantine, the commissioners, the previous boards, this board, town meeting members, that significant pieces of open space have been added to the system. We have done that. Those once-in-a-lifetime opportunities, we've done a few of them, including Fisher Hill and the back landfill. And it's been great to see those. But as you go through the document, it's clear, and through the planning process, we heard loud and clear, people in the community desire for more open space, and the desire for a thoughtful dialogue of how that open space that we have is utilized, and how things are planned for, and how we take care of those resources. I will note that we were walking, I would call it a balance, knowing that all of you were in your 4th night of town meeting last Thursday night. At 7:30 on Friday morning, we put this out the door. We realize and appreciate that it's a several hundred-page document. It was an extensive process. We thank the board for their time. I'd like to ask Paula Vimonti to come up to say a few words and share some information with you, and then Werner shall follow.
Thanks, Tom. So I just wanted to take a couple of minutes to mostly reinforce what Tom already mentioned in terms of the process, the subcommittees that we worked in. My day job is actually in watershed management and resiliency planning. And so, as Tom mentioned, each one of us who either staff to subcommittee, kind of brought different perspectives in terms of our disciplines, our expertise, our passions. So it was a really interesting project for the town to take on. And I think even though this is the open space plan, there were a lot of ways to integrate how we address watershed level issues, water quality issues. So I specifically was very interested in the greenways aspect. Werner will talk a little bit about climate change, but we really use this document and the process to arrive to it as a way to bring these kind of issues to the fore for the constituents of Brookline. How is the community going to prepare itself for climate change? How are we actually looking at these open spaces as a way to address water quality issues? So I just wanted to reiterate a few points that Tom made through this document, which is going to be with us for the next 7 years. There are aspects of conservation that we are looking at very strategically, but also how are we making our community resilient in the face of climate change. So, as Tom mentioned, it's a big document, but a lot of work went into it, and we tried to fold in between the goals, objectives, and the action plan items, specific strategies that we are hoping to work on for the next few years. So hopefully you'll get the time to look at it more carefully, but I just wanted to highlight those particular aspects of the plan. Werner?
Thank you. I'm Werner Lowy, and I'd just like to mention sort of two themes that run throughout this plan, which is public education and climate change. Not surprisingly, although climate change was addressed in the last plan, it really has been given considerably more attention in this plan. The relationship between open space and the climate is, at the same time, it's obvious, but it's also complex and difficult to manage. On the one hand, climate change threatens our open space, and with flooding and heat and drought. But on the other hand, it's our open spaces that help protect us from these same things. So in this new era, as it were, our need to protect open space becomes even more important. I mean, it's, for instance, trees help protect us, help keep things cool, but they're also threatened by the warming climate. So this sort of thing is called out in much more specificity in this plan than it has been in the past. For instance, under the urban forest goal, Objective 5 is to evaluate medium and long-term effects of climate change on the urban forest and identify synergies in planning for climate change and protecting the urban forest. So, it's really specifically called out in the plan as something so that we don't just sort of do it on the fly, but we think about it in an organized way. In addition, on all these things, there's only so much that town staff can do. And I think one of the most important parts of this plan is that it acknowledges that where possible, we should strengthen the relationship between town staff and residents. There's always been a big section in the plan, as there is now, on public education, but I think we've incorporated the public more into the work that actually needs to be done in this plan as well. For instance, in developing greenways, one of the specific actions that's to be taken is to involve residents in the process of doing that. And two things that have gotten more and more attention since we last did an open space plan are flip sides of the same coin. That is the value of biodiversity and the increasing conflicts between people and wildlife. So that's addressed in more detail, and we're going to do more to educate people, hopefully, in the next 7 years than we have in the past. And I'm personally thinking of giving a guest lecture on how I learned to make peace with a skunk that lives under the shed in my backyard.
I'd watch that podcast.
But seriously, there are many, many things like this in the plan. There are more things that we have time to talk about. But I think it's a very good plan, and we'll turn it back to Tom.
So I tried to give you a very quick snapshot of where we've been, why we took the journey we did, and what we were hoping to accomplish, and what we had for an end product. As stated, I'd like to take a moment and just publicly thank the committee folks, but really a special thank you to Katie Weatherseed, who's the Conservation Assistant, who this 300-plus page document you see in front of you is from Katie's desk and from Katie's computer, with several of us looking over her shoulder while she's trying to diligently get it done. She's done terrific work, and I am most grateful for that. We would ask for the board's consideration, if you deem it appropriate, to adopt the open space plan as presented and as developed over the past 3.5 years, and we'd be more than happy to answer any questions or queries that you may have. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any questions, comments?
Well, I think it's a gargantuan piece of work, and it's an excellent piece of work, and I want to just thank the commissioners for working so hard on it. I know that, I co-chair a climate action committee with Werner, and so I've heard a little bit about it, and I'm pleased that it's meshing, those two issues are meshing in the way that they are, because I think that is so important going forward, and the issues are really tied together.
Yeah. Thank you.
Well, I was on this committee for quite a while. It's been a long slog, but I think the product is very much worth it. And I really urge people to read it. It's a lot of pages. However, you can pick out particular, for example, parks that are in your neighborhood and learn something about them in terms of, the not only the titling aspects, but also the facilities in these parks. That's very interesting and very helpful, as well as the other aspects of the report that give you a good sense of what Brookline's physical whatever is
inventory.
Like. Well, yeah, inventory, but Brookline as a physical place, with open spaces, with trees, with water resources, et cetera, is. We don't always think about that until we actually have something like an open space plan that tells us, yes, here's what we have here in this town. So I guess the question is, whether we want to vote this tonight or to wait until next week. I don't think we have a deadline, but we do want to wrap this up as soon as possible so we can begin to actually use the plan in terms of a number of issues such as opportunities that may come to us with respect to open space planning, as well as looking at development issues from the standpoint of the balance between open space and economic and development of our town, which is an important priority also. So what's the sense of the board in terms of tonight or next week?
Mr. Chairman, if I may?
Yes.
Just to let you know what our next steps will be. If the board does deem it appropriate to proceed with the vote tonight, we would be most grateful and say thank you. But our next step is going to be, we have just really the cover letter to insert from the chairman of the Conservation Commission. We would insert the board's vote into the plan. And then our intent is to put the plan up onto the website right away, to follow up on your comment, to make it searchable by keyword. So if you just want to look up something on Monmouth Park, you would type in Monmouth and it would bring you right to that plan. And we've worked with Ben Vivante at the website to do that, and we're ready to make that happen in short order.
Well, I'm in favor of going ahead and approving it.
Okay.
I think that it's...
Anyone object? Well, let's vote. Okay. I move approval of the Open Space and Recreation Plan presented to us by Mr. Brady, and available online for everyone to review and learn from. All in favor, Mr. Franco?
Aye.
Ms. Howard?
Aye.
Ms. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Fernandez?
Aye.
And chair votes aye. Thank you.
Thank you all very much. We appreciate it.
Okay, good. Okay, next, question of approving the following application of Hersha Hospitality Management, LLP, doing business as...
I think you skipped the
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, cross this off and get down to where we are. Outdoor seating, question of approving the application of Temptation Cafe, Inc., doing business as Temptation Cafe, holder of a common victualler license at 1350 Beacon Street for outside seating consisting of 4 tables and 8 chairs.
Hi.
Hello.
How are you?
Please introduce yourself.
My name is Lutfi, and I'm one of the owners at Temptations Cafe.
Great. Pardon me?
Pretty straightforward. I said it's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, okay. Well, tell us what you want to do and why we should approve it.
Well, it's, we're just asking for some outdoor seating. We noticed a lot of the other businesses in the area have had them, and we're just looking for a couple tables so people can sit and enjoy their lunches outside.
Right.
We've been in Brookline for a long time, in that specific location, almost 10 years. We had another location that goes back up to 18 years ago, but that's no longer there. So we just want to add some more seating for our customers outside.
And I see you have all approvals, and you do not serve alcohol. It's a coffee shop, basically.
That's correct, yeah. Coffee and sandwiches.
Right. And your hours are no later, that you're asking for, are no later than 7 p.m.
Yep.
Starting at 7 a.m. on Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. on Saturday, 9 a.m. on Sunday. So there are no issues with respect to noise and disruption of the community. Any questions on the board?
I'll just say I walk through there very often and have been surprised that you don't already have tables and chairs because the sidewalk is wide enough to accommodate. And when I am in your establishment, it is always very busy. So you definitely will have people interested in the extra seating.
That's what we're hoping for, yeah.
And I'll say I took a look at this application, in particular the diagram that was attached to it with the hat of the board's representative to the Commission for the Disabled, and I'm satisfied that there's enough clearance between the tables and the tree pit and the curb to allow for people to navigate through the Beacon Street sort of corridor past Temptations, but also to enter and exit vehicles, particularly with a handicap ramp from the curbside parking. So I am supportive of this application as well.
Any other comments from the board?
I've had coffee there, it's delicious, and I look forward to having it outside.
Thank you very much. We look forward to having you.
I recommend the Cuban sandwich. It's very good.
This is not a public hearing, but I see people lining up. Do you want to speak?
Thank you very much for the opportunity. I'm David Lashinsky, Chair of the Coolidge Corner Merchants Association, owner and operator of Eureka Puzzles. I'm also a resident of the town. And I just wanted to say that Lou and I talked about his having cafe tables and chairs when we first launched the program in Brookline, maybe 3 or 4 years ago now. The thing that has been hard to convey is that Brookline and all of our commercial centers are constantly trying to vie for our viability with online options. The only way we succeed is by having a compelling, a vibrant, and interesting area for people to come. And one way of doing that is providing more seating. And certainly having seating at the cafe steak, at Temptations is such an important way to not only say, hey, there's a place that you can go and sit and enjoy the outside, but it's also one that highlights one of Brookline's really great eateries and makes it more likely that people will stay in the area. And if they stay in the area, hopefully they'll spend money there, in addition to buying great coffee and Cuban sandwiches. So I fully, along with all the other merchants in the area, fully back this application and hope, and I'm very pleased to hear that my comments were almost unnecessary today. So thank you.
And I've bought puzzles at your location, one of which I still haven't figure out how to get those things untied or undone. So.
We're always happy to provide assistance.
No, it forces me to just stretch my brain. I'm still working on it. Any other questions? Okay, I move approval of the application of Temptation Cafe, Inc., doing business as Temptation Cafe, for outdoor seating for 4 tables and 8 chairs. All in favor? Mr. Franco?
Aye.
Ms. Heller?
Aye.
Ms. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Fernandez?
Aye.
And chair votes aye. Thank you.
Thank you guys very much.
Okay.
Have a great night.
Okay, next. Question of approving the following application of Hersha Hospitality Management, LLP, doing business as Courtyard Marriott, holder of all kinds of alcoholic beverages, as an in-holder license at 40 Webster Street. Yes.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Andrew Upton, representing the licensee. With me is Catherine Stevens, the proposed manager of record. Tonight, we're asking for your approval for Catherine as the manager of record and to increase the hours by a slight margin. Catherine has extensive experience in the hotel industry and in the sale and service and the supervision of the sale and service of alcohol. We've been working with the licensing staff over the past few months to get this application in shape. There will be no other changes.
Can we quiet?
There'll be no other changes to any aspect of the operation of the premises. We're just asking for a change of manager and an increase in the hours. And we're glad to answer any questions.
Okay. This is Courtyard Marriott. Okay.
So.
Oh, wait, I was going to indicate the location of this is such that there are probably no issues with residents or disruption of residents, et cetera. I'm sorry, Ms. Heller?
That's okay. We have a report here from the police lieutenant about the lack of an alternate manager. What are your plans in that respect?
We have already submitted applications for 3 separate alternate managers. One is complete, and the other 2 are just waiting for appointments to be fingerprinted.
Okay, well, I'm for one, I'm happy to approve Ms. Stevens as the manager, except I would want to condition that upon your having in place the alternate managers.
Condition the manager appointment or the increase in hours?
I'm sorry, increase the, it's late. Condition the increase in hours until you have the alternate managers in place.
We have spoken to the licensing staff, and one of the alternate managers, the application is in place, and she believes you'll be hearing that at next week's meeting.
We can do that next week?
Yes.
We can do it next week.
You mean hold?
Well, I was just mentioning that we can accommodate the approval of the alternate manager next week.
Okay.
That's all I said.
But we'll approve the main manager now.
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Right, and would you also be approving the hours contingent upon the approval of that manager next Tuesday? Is that what I'm
Yes.
hearing?
Yes.
Okay.
No, that's-
Just so we know if we have to come back or not.
Yeah.
So, I'm sorry, go ahead. Mr.
I was just going to ask Ms. Stevens to maybe articulate some of the Brookline-specific rules we have around the service of alcohol. I'm sure you sat down with Lieutenant Raskin and had a very detailed conversation.
I did. He was actually very helpful. Yes, Brookline is a little different than some of the other communities that I've been in. So all of us have been on-premise tips trained, which is to ensure proper service of alcohol. And our associates who are working are all of legal age to pour alcohol. They have all been trained on how to properly identify if somebody has appropriate identification. And they have also taken the, I and my managers have taken the on-premise tips training. My associates have taken the online training, and everybody's passed beautifully.
Great.
And I do apologize. Also, we've all taken the crowd manager, which was actually very sad and very scary to watch. I don't know if you've seen it, but made me cry. So, yeah, very, very good training.
I would just make sure that everybody is aware, as it sounds like you are, that Brookline has some different rules and regulations. We're a little bit more detailed in what we require of individuals who are listed on the license. And we do take the service of alcohol very seriously here. And as I'm sure Lieutenant Raskin told you, we will do undercover stings. We'll send in underage individuals to come in and test you to see how good you are. And I hope that we don't see you back here again in the context of a disciplinary hearing. So,
Understood. Prior to this, I also ran the Scoreboard Sports Bar and Grill for 2.5 years and had a very comprehensive and fantastic relationship with the liquor board there for compliance reasons. And believe me, they tried to get us a lot, and they never did.
So in terms of the hours that are conditional on the alternate manager being approved, how would they know about the approval?
I'll let them know.
Okay. And you think it'll be done next week or
Next
so?
week, yeah.
Okay, great.
If they're all the paperwork's in, we can do it next week.
Okay. Any other questions or
So are we
comments?
just going to vote on the
No, we're voting,
alternate, on the manager tonight, and then next week we'll do the alternate
So
manager and the hours?
I would propose that we do the manager tonight, we do the hours, and condition it on approval of an alternate manager.
And once the alternate manager is approved and you get notice, you can open or extend the hours.
That sounds fine. Thank you.
Okay, great. It's not a hearing. Any questions from the audience? Ms. Frawley?
Opportunity with the manager here, great opportunity. We've used, the Town Meeting Members Association has used one of your function rooms across the lobby from your desk. In the past, you've even provided some light refreshments for one of our annual, couple of times for our annual meetings. Last time I went in to rent it, nobody knew what I was talking about. So we'd love to see that return, and same goes for the Holiday Inn. We used to be able to use your one of your basement ballrooms, and I don't know what happened there. I only know personally asking to use your room. So I'd love to see that restored. It's not certainly a condition of the license, but especially in this case, they are sitting on leased land from the town of Brookline. Thank you.
Well, Marianne has
Lovely
heard your
gesture.
request. Nothing we can do about it.
I can just tell you that the manager, Catherine Stevens, told me that she is on premise approximately 70 to 80 hours a week at this demanding job. And now that you've seen her in person, she'll be glad to talk to you anytime you come in.
Okay, call for a vote for approval of the manager, Catherine Jean Stevens, and approval of the change of hours for Hersha Hospitality Management doing business as Courtyard Marriott from 10 p.m. to 12 a.m. Or extended from 10 p.m.
No, 10 a.m.
Oh,
to
okay.
10 p.m.
Okay, so there's a mistake here. 10 a.m. in the morning to 12 a.m., which is midnight.
That's Monday through Saturday, and then Sunday, it would be noon to midnight, so 12 p.m. to 12 a.m.
Okay, all in favor?
And those increased hours, again, are conditional upon approval of an alternate manager application. Correct?
Correct.
Okay.
And thank you, Mr. Franco.
I just wanted to be sure I knew what the motion
Well, no,
was.
I had missed that. And I appreciate your filling in
You
there.
can count on me to be a stickler for detail.
We always
I guess.
can, and that's very important. All in favor, Mr. Franco?
Aye.
Ms. Heller?
Aye.
Ms. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Fernandez?
Aye.
And chair votes aye. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
So, Ms. Tapazzo.
Good evening, Jennifer DePazzo Gilbert. I am here for what was formerly the Holiday Inn. We're seeking doing a business change in name to the Inn at Brookline, as well as a change in the manager. And here with me this evening is Anthony Adianto, the proposed new manager. And also with me, seated in the first row there, is Bruce Robetti from Highgate Hotels. Mr. Adianto has extensive experience in managing hotels. He's worked at the Boston Park Plaza, the Doubletree in Boston, Cambridge, the Holiday Inn, and Hilton's in Connecticut. He is TIPS trained and crowd management certified. There's no change in the hours requested. We, too, will be submitting paperwork for the alternate managers. I believe the only outstanding issue that I touched base with Tiffany Sousa this afternoon, as well as the police department, is that the birth certificate for Mr. Adianto has been processed and is in the mail. So the vote would be subject to the police department, Derek Hayes or Lieutenant Raskin, reviewing that. The Holiday Inn is going to be undergoing some renovations. There was some permitting that we worked on to give the whole building there a facelift and add 38 additional rooms on the inside. It's a beautiful project, and the next step is to get the materials and colors of the facade approved by the planning board. Some of the neighbors requested an on-site viewing of those, and that's pretty typical in that type of renovation project. So that's exciting. We hope to get that underway by the end of the year. And other than that, that's about it.
Okay, any questions?
I'll again just ask if you could talk a little bit about your meeting with Lieutenant Raskin and some of the Brookline-specific rules and regulations we have around the service of alcohol.
Yeah, absolutely. So, meeting with Lieutenant Raskin, I mean, Brookline is definitely more strict than other districts I've been in, but everything they went over is very straightforward, to the point, makes sense. Obviously, carding every person that comes into the bar, regardless of how they look. I mean, just uniformed, following the policies that's written by the town. Then there's no gray area. It's all black and white.
So you'll even card me with the gray hair?
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely.
Can you talk a little bit about the logbook and what has to be in that that binder that you keep?
Yeah, I mean, I actually have part of it with me, but like keeping track of any IDs that get turned away, keeping the notebook by at the bar, just the name, date, turn them away at this point, making sure that, yeah, well, that's pretty much the gist of that, yeah.
Any other questions? This is not a public hearing, but if people in the audience would like to make a point or raise a question?
Yes, can I do it from here?
No, you have to go out there. We're televised, and although, unlike what Mr. Wyszynski said, we don't have a vast audience. We do have an audience of people who want to hear you and will comment if they can't. So speak into the microphone.
Thank you. My name is Deborah Brown. I am a Brookline resident, and I am actually an abutter of the Holiday Inn. I spoke with council and the general manager briefly. As you know, the Holiday Inn is in need of some repair. One of the issues is the back alley. It is full of potholes. And we talked briefly about them looking at it tomorrow, but I'd like to make, since you're waiting for the birth certificate, can we make all of this sort of conditional on getting a work plan for repairing the potholes, which I would argue are actually a public safety risk at this point?
I think that's a separate issue, isn't it?
I'm just not aware of them.
Yeah. I mean, that's something that we can direct the, who would be the...
Well, I don't know who owns, I'm not familiar with it.
They own it.
Yeah.
They own it.
So it's not a public way, it's a private way, so every property owner owns to the center line in. There are definitely potholes there. The Highgate is definitely going to look at them actually Thursday, because that's when the local person is available to go out there and look. Some of the bigger ones have already been patched, and we'll definitely clean it as well. You know, we heard these complaints during the permitting for the new project, and it's actually a condition already on the special permit that was received, but we've agreed to look at it much earlier because the construction's probably not going to start for some time, and spoke to Deb about looking at it much earlier, so we will do that. But linking it to the liquor license, I don't think is appropriate in this
No.
particular case.
Any other questions from the audience, or Ms. Brown, do you have anything else?
I just,
Okay.
I just want to get it on the record. It's
Okay.
public health issue.
It's on the record.
If you're going to be approving a liquor license, I figure, public health falls under that as well.
Yeah, you don't want to stumble out of a bar into a pothole. I don't.
Speak from experience.
No comment. Okay, any other questions or comments? Okay, I move approval of the change in name from, or change of DBA for CCLH LLC, doing business as Holiday Inn Boston at Brookline at 1200 Beacon Street, to CCLLH LLC, doing business as The Inn at Brookline, and change of manager for the same, from Mauricio Patino to Anthony Adianto.
And that vote should be conditional upon police review and approval of birth certificate documentation.
Conditional on police review and approval of birth certificate documentation. All in favor? Mr. Franco?
Aye.
Ms. Heller?
Aye.
Ms. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Fernandez?
Aye.
And chair votes aye. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Someone left their glasses here, they might be back.
Those are mine. Missing those, thanks a lot.
No, he's looking for me, couldn't see him. Okay. Oh, final item on our agenda, question.
Gavel, gavel, gavel.
Okay, question of appointing Melvin A. Kleckner as town administrator for a 3-year term commencing on September 15, 2019. We've all read and discussed the employment agreement. Any questions? Anything you'd like to say?
Well, let me just say that I worked with my colleagues on the board and sort of spearheaded a conversation with Mr. Kleckner about this. I'm confident that this agreement is fair. It largely mirrors what we've had in the past. There's no substantial changes. It's for a 3-year term, and I am an enthusiastic supporter of approval of this agreement and the retention of Mr. Kleckner as the town administrator.
I second it.
And I second your statement that we should enthusiastically support this. Mel has been a very excellent town administrator, and I think that some of the comments at town meeting illustrates how he's willing to reach out and work with people on a number of somewhat difficult issues. In addition to what we heard at town meeting, there are a lot of other issues where he's been very responsive to the need to sort of think outside the box, think creatively in dealing with issues that are sensitive and difficult, especially here in Brookline. So I echo Select Person Franco's enthusiasm for approving the employment.
I think we had a question or a comment.
Sure, yeah, I just want to say that I appreciate the previous select board making the wise decision to hold this this particular decision until after the election took place. I've had an opportunity to sit down directly and meet with Mr. Kleckner, but also to watch him in action, and I look forward to continuing to watch him in action and work with him over the next few years.
Yep.
I'll just say that
Ms.
just like staff needs to be directed through policy, our town administrator really does take his cues from the select board, who are elected and ultimately responsible to the voters. That is the process of government that we have here in Brookline.
And Ms. Hamilton indicated a big responsibility for us. We can't leave the town administrator out there on a limb. We have got to give direction and think of those things where that direction is appropriate and provided. So, I move approval of,
It's actually two votes, the reappointment and then the approval of the contract.
two votes. First, I move approval of the reappointment of Melvin A. Kleckner as town administrator for a 3-year term commencing on September 15, 2019. All in favor, Mr. Franco?
Aye.
Ms. Heller?
Aye.
Ms. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Fernandez?
Aye.
And chair votes aye. Second, I move approval and authorizing the execution of the renewal employment agreement with Town Administrator Melvin A. Kleckner. All in favor, Mr. Franco?
Aye.
Ms. Heller?
Aye.
Ms. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Fernandez?
Aye.
And chair votes aye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And that concludes business of this meeting of the Board of the Select Board of Brookline. Thank you.